IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown podcast. We are live here breaking down some Notre Dame football because some practice opportunities to watch it today. Brian and the crew were at the practice this morning, so they got a lot of insight into what this Notre Dame team is going to look like for the bowl game. We saw some young quarterbacks that were on campus, obviously. Mr. CJ Carr. We're going to talk some wide receivers, wide receiver coach. Got to see Mike Brown coach live for the first time at the University of Notre Dame. So we're going to break that down, practice report to start this podcast. We're also going to dive into, obviously, the big news that has circulated over the last 24 hours and that hit us right in the middle of our show yesterday was, of course, with Jared Parker now taking the head coaching job at Troy. We have a opportunity for Notre Dame to be in the offensive coordinator circuits again, Brian. So it's a busy show, man. We're going to talk about some of the candidates we like and everything else in between, man.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, man. It's going to be fun. Responding to some of the comments in the chat is going to be fun as well. So, but let's start off with practice report, Ryan. Does that sound like a plan to you, man?
Let's do it, man. A lot of encouraging things. I know we were talking right before we started here, but a lot of young guys that were mentioned, obviously, in this practice report. And again, boards@irishbreakdown.com is where you could have gotten this practice report even before the show started. So make sure to stay tuned
and
there.
Before the published article came out as well. Yes.
So if you want the first-hand analysis as soon as possible before anybody else in the web space, cyberspace, or the chat space get it, make sure to go to boards@irishbreakdown.com. Brian, wanted to start with a quarterback that is now playing for the University of Notre Dame. Number 17, CJ Carr,
weird.
which is I know it's funny. Obviously, we probably can deduce that number 13 is being held for another certain quarterback, but
yeah.
CJ Carr sounded like he impressed you a little bit for your first time seeing him in a Notre Dame uniform.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, look, first of all, a lot of my focus today was on younger guys. Like, I don't think anybody cares what Benjamin Morrison looked like today. Okay, we know he's really good. Hey, J.D. Bertrand looked really good in his 957th practice at Notre Dame, right? So I tried to focus on some of the younger guys we hadn't seen, guys that had been hurt. And then, of course, you look at CJ, and it was kind of fun to watch him and Kenny Minchie. So, like, when they came out, the team is still stretching. The quarterbacks had gone through their stretches, and they're going through just throwing warm-ups, so they're side by side. So it's like two guys catty-cornered with it's CJ and Kenny Minchie side by side. And then Steve Angeli's over there with Gino Guidugli. And just watching Kenny and CJ throw side by side, you're like, dude, that's some arm talent right there with those two kids, right? And they throw the ball very differently. Yep. Kenny's got a little bit of that gunslinger type of throwing motion. CJ's got that, I'm a football guy my entire life. I came out of the womb with a quarterback, the ball type of, approach where it's just real clean, real crisp.
Yep.
Can change arm angles. And like, I just looked over at Vince and I said, I had somebody who was at the first practice CJ was in, text me and he's like, ball just comes out of this kid's hand different. This kid's special. And I don't know if he's going to be special because, we need to watch him against defenses and all that stuff. But the ball definitely comes out of his hand, Ryan. And it just got, like him and Kenny would start throwing at the same time and the ball would just get there a lot sooner for CJ because he's got a quicker release and the ball just comes out with like a really nice flat plane, but it doesn't like dive and it doesn't, it's just a really crisp. They both throw really tight spirals. Like, at one point, Vince, like, the ball looks different going that way than it does coming back this way. You know what I mean? And he was spot on. It's just real crisp. Again, the two things that can get into trouble is if the nose dips down too much, or if the nose comes out higher, and it just was really sharp, really tight spirals, really flat plane coming out. They both threw really nice deep balls. They all threw good deep balls today, Steve included. Just getting the ball proper placement, threw the ball well on the run. CJ did today, which I was surprised by. I shouldn't say I was surprised by. It was nice to see. Is kind of what I meant to say. Rolling to the left, throwing like 10-yard outcuts from the far hash, and just moving around. So the ball just really came out clean. Now we only saw him throw like 2 or 3 one-on-one routes. Most of it was Steve and then some Kenny. But we only got 3 periods. Yeah, so that was it. We didn't get a ton. And then half of the 1 periods, they were doing like lineman versus lineman throwing drills, right? And one of them was Christopher Tarrick going against, I can't remember who it was, a defensive lineman. And so he runs a fade route, and CJ drops it like perfectly over his outside. Christopher Terek catches it for
He
a touchdown,
caught it.
and the offense just goes nuts, and that was really impressive to see. But no, he looked good, Ryan. He looked sharp. He just you want a quarterback that carries himself a certain way, and CJ carries himself in just a really like that those are things that you look for when you're evaluating quarterbacks, right? I mean, I'm sure you do when you go to the
Yep.
college. It's like, how does this guy carry himself? How does he interact with other people? There's all that stuff that
So
matters
important.
much more for me for a quarterback than it does for a receiver.
Yeah.
Like receiver could be the biggest prick in the world, but if he's a 4.3 and he can catch and run great routes, it's like you kind of put up with him being the biggest prick in the world. You know what I mean?
Sure.
But with quarterback, you'd prefer someone that's going to be, just has that presence with him, and CJ certainly has that. There's no doubt about it.
So, do you think Christopher Terek has a future as a blocking tight end in
Yes,
this Notre
they
Dame
will
system?
definitely be running fade routes with Christopher. No, I'm totally kidding. But no, I mean, but it was a great catch. I mean, and
Nice.
he looked good running it for an offensive lineman, right? I mean, that's the key he's an offensive lineman. But no, it was good to see him, and Joe Wadding we talked about this yesterday. We kind of saw Joe standing next to his mom. No, it was good. And how much better he looked standing next to, bigger looking. But you saw him today. He's definitely filled out. He's definitely put on some good weight. So it's good to see him move around. Watched a lot of the younger linemen a little bit today, Ryan. So Sullivan Absher and Jagasaw are huge, but they're leaner than they were.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like they don't look as
that was the thing I loved to when Absher first got to Notre Dame. I think that was like a big emphasis that he had even just going to before he got on campus was that like he wanted to trim off some of the baby fat, and kind of get himself into better conditioning. So that's great to hear. I mean, because honestly, the big determiner of if in my opinion, if Absher can stay at offensive tackle or if he moves inside the guard is the flexibility that he's able to play with, right? So I think trimming up that frame and just being a little bit crisper with how his body formation will be big for him, obviously.
100%. 100%. Sam Pendleton looked really good moving around. Sully looked good moving around. And obviously Charles Jagasaw, just like, again, he's huge. But just, you can tell when a guy's big and there's just a little bit more muscle and a little less fat than there was. Not a ton because it's only been from like August to now. I mean, you're only going to reform your body so much in that period of time, but you can start to see it take shape. Moving with much more confidence, like he knows what he's doing now in drills. So this is drills, right? I mean, we didn't see any one-on-ones. We didn't see any, team run. This is just, I mean, sometimes you just look, this guy has a much better understanding of what he's just doing, just going through drills.
Sure.
And that's important for freshmen because when you're thinking about like, dude, I don't even know how to get my stance. I don't even know how to go through this drill we're working on. You're not going to be like, here's the proper way to handle a mic end twist or a will end twist with Maris Leofau and, Jordan Patelho on an inside zone play away from me. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the last thing on your mind. Yep. And so that was good to see from him as well today. But, we didn't get to see we didn't see the linemen going against the defense at all, except for the pass game one-on-ones where like they were running routes. That was and it was like second string guys versus, second string guys and stuff. So it wasn't even like, Javonte Jean-Baptiste versus Tosh Baker. It wasn't anything like that. It was.
They should have brought Joe Walt, even though he's not playing in the bowl game. He needs to just go out there and run some fades, baby. Good to go.
I don't think his dad would have cared much for that. His dad and his agent might have had an issue with that one a little bit. But
agreed.
Yeah, but no, it was good to see those things, and again, seeing the quarterback still around. Steve was solid today. I mean, Ryan, he was a typical Steve Angeli. Threw a nice deep ball. He certainly has a lot of swagger. You can just see it, how he carries himself. That's one thing you always like about Steve Angeli is he does carry himself with some presence, right? He's not just there, but, throwing the ball, it was kind of what you expect from Steve. He throws some really nice balls, and then he'll have some where his ball placement's just like, just not where you want it to be. Little low on some throws, and Kenny was a little bit erratic today. Threw a fade route, a fade ball to Jaden Greathouse. It got picked off by Jaden Mickey in a one-on-one in the end zone. Threw the deep ball well.
So I'm sure Jaden Mickey was talking after that one. I'm sure.
If Jaden Greathouse beat him for a touchdown, Jaden Mickey still be talking. I mean, that's right. How he is. Which you love it, but no, he was good. Watching Mike Brown though too, Ryan, was nice to see because he does a lot of coaching, but everything Like Sean Davis likes to joke about how I was kind of came back from a practice this fall camp, and I was like, I have no idea what the receivers were doing. Like I have no clue what they were doing. Not even close to that today. It was stuff that I like to see. I'm someone who doesn't like. I was never a shoots guy with receivers, right? Like I understand the merit to it, but I'd rather you just train your body to be that way without that aid that's not going to be there when you're out there playing. I just, and I'm a big, work on top ends this way, not with this weird 1 foot thing. And I understand what you're trying to do, but like that's just not my style.
Right.
And so we're watching it today, and they're working on curl routes, and he's focusing on, stopping your feet, driving your hips down. Then he's got like these really tight these big, tall, bags, and they've got to work on coming back through the bags, right? So really focusing on that get out of your break and drive downhill. Biggest
like
mistake.
working through contact type of
Right,
thing. Is like,
right,
okay,
out of your
okay.
break, and also focusing on like if you just stop and turn around, that's not what we want on a curl route. If you stop and turn around on a curl route, guess what? That DB's driving on the ball, and you've stopped, and he now has a target. Where if you keep working back to the ball, that guy can never get back to you. Just stuff like that. Working on speed cuts with cones. So you have like a cone here, 2 there, and then 1 here. And the emphasis being on being sharp out of your speed cut and then working downhill instead of drifting. Biggest mistake you can make on a speed cut is to come out and then keep drifting vertically. That allows the undercut to happen. Just a lot of practical things, Ryan, where it's like, dude, you got to get cute with all the latest this, that, and the other thing. Routes are routes, and there's practical ways to coach them. And he was doing that today. And he's not a real loud guy. Like he's not a screamer, but he's always talking. He's always coaching. He's always got something to say. And whether it's critiquing, whether it's so it was nice to see that today. And he's, he still looks like he can play. And the guy has a hose, by the way. Watching him throw stop routes, like he's the one throwing.
He was a quarterback, right? He was a
Yeah,
quarterback.
he's got a hose. Like
Nice.
he's like, okay, he's like ripping off tight spirals. So you're like, yeah, the receivers are going to be catching some heat when he's throwing to him. So Chancey Stuckey could throw too. He was a quarterback back in the day as well, but he was bringing some heat. So that was good to see, and they looked sharp, Ryan. Part of that's health. Jaden Thomas looked healthy. Jaden Greathouse looked healthy. Deion Colsey looked healthy. KK Smith, we saw him out today. And by the way, KK really impressed me. Like he's a little bit taller than I thought he was going to be, and real smooth, real sharp with his cuts.
What is he, like a shade over 6 foot?
Yeah, like I thought he was going to end up being like 5'11", because guys that are listed at 6 foot in high school end up being 5'10" and a half, 5'11".
Micah Bell 5'11", actually 5'9" and a quarter.
Yeah, exactly. No, but he was real smooth, but also sudden. Looked really crisp running routes today. Caught the ball very well. He impressed me with just athletically. Again, we didn't see a ton, just athletically getting to see him running around, looking good in that number 11 jersey. Playing him in the slot mostly today. And then Jaden Greathouse working outside at the Z, which is kind of what we expected. And somebody else that impressed me today as a route runner, Ryan, was Eli Raridan. Like he looks a lot more comfortable making cuts than the last time we saw him in a practice setting, which was understandable because it was 4 months ago and he was still coming back from his knee injury and hadn't been cleared yet. But it was good to see him. He's really sharp. His acceleration out of cuts is really impressive. Like I won't tell you where they were lining him up because I might get in trouble for that. But really sharp with his top ends and just kind of that acceleration out of breaks. You're like, okay, that's what I want to see.
That's really good to hear. Just kind of backtracking for a second on Mike Brown, just kind of assimilating well, because that's not easy, man. It's not easy to just transition into coaching a team in the bowl game. Like that is not an easy thing at all, because you're still getting to know these kids, right? And I know, fortunately, you probably got a little bit of a head start to be able to get to know them a little bit, but still, it's not a easy transition. So I'm excited to see him working with these young wide receivers and just how much of an impact he can make in just a short amount of time. Like, I don't expect it to be like going from a underwhelming group to a great group in like a few days span here into the bowl game, but just seeing growth from what we've seen throughout the entirety of the season with guys like, just growth from Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison, and, the first look we get at KK Smith, and being able to get Jaden Thomas back fully healthy. And it's really exciting, man. It surely is. So, great stuff on the wide receivers, Brian. Anybody else offensively that just kind of popped for you at all? I know you said you didn't really see much offensive line and defensive line, because that's just,
Yeah, you're going to like this one, Ryan. Jeremiah Love.
We talked about that one a little bit.
We talk about a presence, right? You can tell Jeremiah is like, hey, man, this is my opportunity. Audrick's gone. We got a loaded backfield. He just kind of had a swagger to him, and he ran a route today. Like, I still don't know how he cut that way. So, like,
Yeah.
they're running, it's like from like the 5-yard line. And it's a one-on-one against Jalen Sneed.
I
He's
think
to the right.
I think I saw this circulate on Twitter, by the way. So I think I
Okay.
know exactly what rep you're talking
So
about.
he
Yeah.
runs like a little, like he's running just a quick, vertical outcut, cuts out. Jalen Sneed tries to underneath, and he just suddenly plants and gets vertical and just torches Jalen Sneed. Ball came a little bit late, makes a great catch on the back line. And you just watch, and this isn't an insult to Audric Estime in any way, shape. They're just different backs. He's put 35 pounds on those guys, and they may not cut like they do now either. But just when you watch him and Jadarian Price come out of breaks, you're just like, there's just an explosiveness there. But the difference between Jeremiah and everybody else is Jeremiah also has a suddenness that I just don't know that anybody else has. Like Jadarian's got some, I mean, he showed this year, he's got some cutting ability. He's got explosiveness. There's no doubt. He's got a ton of talent. But Jeremiah's change of direction suddenness is something
it's like
that's
stop
just,
start, right? It's like come to a quick easy stop and then
Ryan, it was a
90
or it was a 45-degree cut or a 90-degree cut that you just shouldn't be able to make. A human being shouldn't be able to make running full speed. Like, you just shouldn't be able to do that. You should have planted and drifted outside. That's what every other human being I know does. But he planted and got straight vertical and gave the quarterback an angle. You're like, dude, that's different, man.
Yep.
That's different. And there's just like I said, there's a lot of that in the freshman and sophomore classes. There's a lot of just that's different.
I agree.
That guy's a little bit different.
I'm not surprised at all, just based upon what we've seen just briefly in Jeremiah Love's career and what I saw a lot in high school, obviously, that he is a different type of athlete, man. And that's why this offensive coordinator opportunity, Brian, really gets me pumped up, because a couple of the guys that you're hearing, it's like I could see them doing a whole lot with a player like Jeremiah Love for sure. And we're going to give the offensive coordinator talk in a second here. Any other final thoughts? I know offensive lineman, you already talked about. Charles Jagasaw looked good. Looks like he's trimming some of the bad weight that he may have had early on his frame. Sullivan Absher's reshaping his body. Looks good. Christopher Tarrick in the 101, apparently against Tyson Ford, where he, got the touchdown in the end zone. Any other just final thoughts on what you saw today before we transition to the offense coordinator stuff?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through a lot of energy today. Like a lot of energy during that one-on-one, a lot of celebrating with each other, a lot of back and forth, guys being fired up. Good energy, good natural energy, a lot of communication, a lot of talking, a lot of purpose, getting from drill to drill, a lot of purpose. Saw Dylan Devison working at receiver today. Forgot to mention that. They just need bodies. Yeah, he was down there kind of working with the defense, like he was,
How
with the scout
did he
team
look?
guys.
Was he just there, or was he just?
No, he was quick. I mean, he looked like he can give you a look. Like, are you going to move him to receiver full time? Maybe, as a scout team guy. But like he look like when he puts gloves on and puts a blue jersey on, you're like, that kid's an athlete. You're like, that kid's an athlete. So you need guys like him and Leo Schuyler and players like that to be able to give the defense a good look, because you need all the scholarship guys up with the varsity to get through a game. You can't afford to throw a couple guys down there. So I would imagine during practices for the bowl game, we're going to see a lot of on good when it comes to 7-on-7 and 1-on-1s, just because they need to be able to get that work. But they're not going to be able to put those guys down there for team. They're going to need all the scholarship guys. So putting Dylan Devins is down there, catches the ball well, nice quickness, nice athleticism. So you're like, okay, that's going to help give the offense a look, because he moves around. And I've said this before. I think Leo Schuyler is a really good football player. If I was like at an Indiana State or, when I was at Duquesne, I'd have recruited the heck out of Leo Schuyler. He could have come to my level and been a dude, and guys like that can really help Notre Dame. And even if it's not on the field on Saturdays, it's a kid that's going to like really make you better, because he's going to make your starting DBs work. So that was good to see. Yeah.
All right. So a lot of notes there, obviously talking quarterbacks, CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie, Steve Angeli, talked a little Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, some of the running backs, some of the wide receivers, and obviously Mike Brown associated there, an offensive lineman. So if you missed any part of that talk, go back to parts of this episode, because we're not gonna recap every single player.
You know what?
I mean,
one other thing. Jordan Faison ran a sick route today. He was running against Clarence Lewis, and he was running like just kind of a crosser in the goal line.
Yeah.
And he just planted, let Clarence go flying by, and like pivoted back and just I mean, you're just like, oh my gosh, that's like, there's nothing you can do about that. The only hope that you have is that he beat you so badly on the cross that when he plants back, he runs into you. It's the only hope you have.
Right. Right.
Is
That's the only
such,
recovery.
and that's the thing, right? When you look at KK and you look at Great House and Faison and Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, there's just a suddenness to them movement wise
Yep.
that is just a little bit like, okay, yeah,
Love it,
I
man.
like that.
A
Yeah,
lot of
I
good
like,
athletes. And then we have National Signing Day tomorrow. Just a quick heads up to you all. National Signing Day tomorrow starting at noon Eastern, our coverage to about 5 o'clock Eastern time, depending on scheduling stuff. And we'll be breaking down not only just the players that are signing with Notre Dame tomorrow, but we'll also have a lot of interviews. So make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because you're not going to want to miss. We have a lot of great interviews already lined up, a lot of stuff cemented. I was literally sending out links earlier today to people just to make sure, hey, here's your link. Here's the time you signed up for. Make sure we're all kosher for tomorrow. So make sure to subscribe everywhere there. We're going to get into offensive coordinator talk next here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. So, Brian, it's been a busy 24 hours, to say the least, even actually before 24 hours when we're talking about the offensive coordinator stuff, because things start to at least circulate out there before we even started our show yesterday. So, unless you've been living under a rock, you all probably know that Jared Parker, former Notre Dame offensive coordinator, originally tight end coach, has taken the job head coach at the University of Troy, which is a very good G5 program. And I think it's going to be a potential really nice stepping stone to Coach Parker if he's able to have a lot of success there. And then we'll see where it takes him after that. But now, Brian, for the third time in the last 3 years, Notre Dame is going to have a new offensive coordinator. So the second offensive coordinator hire the last 2 seasons, obviously, you go from Tommy Rees to Jared Parker, and now the offensive coordinator starts. Before we start talking about names and just impact and people we like and what's at stake for this next hire, it is a huge time right now for Marcus Freeman because we've talked a lot about the strength and conditioning coach and kind of solidifying everything there. Now having the offensive coordinator hire open again, this is a big hire for Coach Freeman just in general.
It is. And by the way, there's also a little nugget on the board about a conversation I had with Ryan Harris last night about this first head coach. And we're going to try to get Ryan on the show. We've had him on before. Ryan's awesome, very knowledgeable, but he trains with Lauren Landau. And I believe he also said Peyton Manning still trains with him as well, I believe. But so there's some firsthand knowledge there. So I put that on the message board, and then we'll try to get Ryan on here over the next week or so to talk about Coach Landau. So it's nice to just talk to someone that's worked out. Yeah, to talk about with somebody that's worked with them. Yeah, you Ryan and Roberts, those first and last names. I don't know what it is. You just love those, but so that was good. But with the offensive coordinator thing, Ryan, we'll talk about specifics and all that. But there's a bigger picture conversation that needs to be had about this. And the fact is that Notre Dame has to get this right. And there can be no like, well, we couldn't afford this guy, couldn't afford that guy. You saved a lot of flipping money on not having to do a buyout last year. Right. And I know for a fact, because I know the boosters directly who would be paying for this, some of them who'd be paying for it. If you go to them, they'll pay whatever you need to pay to get the OC that you want if they think it's something that's going to help you win a championship. And the fact of the matter is they have to get this right. Now, what does it mean to get it right? There's some people say, well, I don't want to bring a guy in who's going to only be here for a year or two. And my thing is, I don't really care about that. Because if he's only going to be here for a year or two and it's because he blows up and I mean, do anyone think that the LSU Tigers are like, man, we shouldn't have brought in Joe Brady? He was only here for a year and left. No, they're like, well, you can leave and we'll go ahead and enjoy this championship ring that you helped us bring.
I mean, Brian, I would even say like even more reason for LSU. It's like if Mike Denbrock left this offseason, was Mike Denbrock's tenure at LSU like a not a success? I mean, he just had those prolific offense this past year for LSU. Right. So yes, I mean, the window doesn't really matter that much to me. It's the impact that you leave. 100%.
Exactly. And that's the key. And so when you look at this offensive hire, I mean, look, defense is rolling. They're recruiting like crazy. Offensive recruiting has been excellent the last 2 years. I was talking with somebody last night and said, it's kind of wild. A buddy of mine asked me, he's like, do you really think Notre Dame is trending in the right direction, or is this just more of the same? And I said, look, in some ways they definitely are trending in the right direction. In other ways, it's just more of the same. And the area where it's trending in the right direction is talent acquisition. I mean, Marcus Freeman is thriving at talent acquisition right now. And I'm like, you guys are going to see it these next 2 or 3 years. There's just different looking cats coming into Notre Dame and already at Notre Dame in those younger classes than we've seen at Notre Dame in a long time. And I said, this is the closest I've seen since the 90s, the early 90s, to Notre Dame bringing in the kind of skill year after year after year after year. I mean, you could make a case, Ryan, that from a raw talent standpoint, that the Christian Gray, the Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey class might be the least upside of the 3 corner classes, because you could look at Christian Gray and Jaden and Micah Bell upside. You could look at Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs. I may pick others. I've heard other people but the point is like 3 years in a row, you're bringing in dudes at cornerback. You're bringing in receivers every year. You're recruiting running back as well as any team in the country right now, in my opinion. I know the recruiting rankings are going to say this or the other thing. I don't care. I'm just saying based on film, Notre Dame can compete with anybody. I mean, there's been years in the past, Ryan, not that long ago, that the day Aeneas Williams shows up, he's the most physically gifted running back on the roster.
Yep.
The day he shows up. Not that long ago, like AKA 2019, right? Where he is the most talented running back on the roster. And he'll be at best, third.
At best, yeah.
Now, as far as the thing about Aeneas is he brings a skill set that allows him to do a lot of different things. So he can play with those guys, and he's very talented. But it's just
he's incredible. Yeah,
that's the conversation we're having. Is that, and so and the reason I say at best because Jeremiah Love's the most gifted.
Yep.
And then you could have a conversation of, okay, some may like Kedron more than Jadarian, some might like Jadarian more than Kedron, but you're probably taking one of those two over Aeneas. And then it's the debate of, is Aeneas better than that other guy in that conversation? And then there's Jabron Payne. And there's been years in the very recent history where Jabron Payne is your first or second most physically talented running back, and he might be fifth next season.
Because he's talented, man. Jabron Payne's not a bad talent at all.
If Jabron Payne has to be your starting running back next year and he carries the ball 200 times, he will be 1,000-yard running back. He has that ability. There's no question. It's just agree. Other guys are just better. I mean, there's not a back on your roster right now that we expect to come back that it's like if he's your starter, you're like, man, that's a bummer. Like all of them can play. Jabron, Aeneas, Kedron, Jadarian, Jeremiah, they can all ball. You watch quarterback, and again, I'm just watching C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchie side by side, and I'm like, those are dudes. Those are dudes.
Well, and just wait until Riley Leonard gets here soon, and then obviously
Deuce Knight shows up a year later. I mean, it's just and watching Eli Raren, I was like 6'7", 250-pound kids are not supposed to move like that. It's just, and then I'm watching Charles Jagasaw and Sullivan Abs are just like mountains of human beings, and you're just like, guys, y'all don't understand.
And by the way, Charles Jagasaw was also a 41-0 wrestling state champion as a junior.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, I'm watching Boubacar go through drills, right? Like the kid can scratch his knee without bending over. I mean, it's nuts. I mean, like, just think about that, everybody. Just stand up and put your arms down, right? Like, and I'm being a bit hyperbolic, and see how far your arms go down. You understand the point that I'm making. Super long athlete. So there's just a lot of things you look at, Ryan, and say, man, the talent acquisition is there. And so that's why this hire is so important, because there's no more excuses for talent. None. Now, okay, you're going to be young next year. There's a lot of teams that would trade their fifth-year starter for a redshirt freshman version of Charles Jagasaw in a heartbeat if they got the right O-line coach. In a heartbeat.
Right.
And so coach them up. Right? Yeah, your receiving core is going to be kind of young next year behind the couple veterans. Your tight end room, with Mitchell Evans out is not, until he comes back, is not going to have a ton of experience. Huh. But good Lord, there's a lot of teams with experience that would gladly trade the problem that they have of our guys just aren't very good, but they're experienced with, your 6'7", 250-pound freak athlete that's probably going to run a 4.5, is going to be phenomenal. So, there's just a ton to like about what you saw. And now it's about, okay, find the right coach that can get the most out of this talent. And it's like this year, I think Jared Parker did some good things this year. And I'll say this, I think the discussion about Jared Parker is just it's kind of embarrassing, I'll be honest with you, the way that we're having it. Like, we can have a conversation. Was Jared Parker great this year? No, I don't think he was great this year. But this thought of like, oh, I'm glad he's gone. He sucked. He's terrible. It's like, we've lost our way in a lot of ways, Ryan. We've lost our way. Notre Dame scored 39.1 points per game. That's a point and a half higher than the best scoring offense they've ever had in school history. And that was back in 1968 with Joe Theismann at quarterback. That's how long ago Notre Dame came anywhere close to scoring the way they scored now. Oh, they scored defensive touchdowns. You don't think the 68 team had any touchdowns other than offensively? That's football. You know, you're going to have probably the second or third best yards per play average in modern history. Modern history for Notre Dame is World War II and beyond, right? So we're talking about almost 100 years. Got to get better in big games. It can be something you can put on the epitaph of every offensive coordinator since Lou Holtz left Notre Dame, right? Like, that's not abnormal. He did some really good things. Wasn't good enough because it wasn't good enough in the big moments. No one will deny that, including Jared Parker. But the fact of the matter is now Marcus Freeman needs to make a hire and give that hire the authority and not even just the authority, the directive. You're not just going to create an offense that scores 45.8 points per game in our 9 wins, which is exactly what Notre Dame is, which they've never come close to that, Ryan. But I need you to be able to do that against Ohio State. I need you to be able to do that against Clemson when they're good. I need you to be able to do that against Georgia. I need you to be able to do that against Bama and, you know what I mean, like Michigan. I need you to do that in those big moments too. When we're on the road against Miami late in the year, and if we win, we're a playoff team, and if we lose, we're out. I need you to show up on those days as well. And that's what this hire has to be, because there's no more excuses for, well, we don't have a good enough quarterback. If you can't develop the talent, they're going to have a quarterback the next 4 years, then you should not be coaching, period.
Yep. Especially at Notre Dame.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you can't coach up the talent on the offensive line that they're going to have here the next 4 years, then you need to find something else to do with your life. If you can't coach the tight ends and the running backs and the receivers, I mean, guys, this is the most physically gifted roster I've seen. And when you include the guys that are coming in, since I've been covering the team, and it's not close. Now, I don't know if there's a Will Fuller on this team, but here's the difference. There's 8 guys that are ballers. Maybe I think Cam Williams can be a Will Fuller type, but there's just
possible.
Chris Brown's not your number 2 on this group moving forward, right? And say I'll see your CJ Prosise and raise you a Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, a Keedron Young, and Aeneas Williams, and a Jabron Payne, right? And that's just the reality of it. Is there's just way too much talent on this roster for me to there's just, again, excuses timer's gone, Ryan. Well, you're not going to have to win with a Drew Pine anymore, because now if your starting quarterback gets hurt, you're going to either CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie or Steve Angeli or Deuce Knight or whoever, you know what I mean? Like, Jeremiah Love got hurt. Oh, wow, it sucks. Yeah, it does suck, but you're putting Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne and Keedron Young and Aeneas Williams in the game. You're going to be fine.
Yes.
It's like there was a time not that long ago when a starting receiver got hurt and you had to go to a walk-on, or you had to bring in Freddie Canteen as a transfer and Cam Smith as transfers to field a roster. Now you're talking about Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell and, hopefully Jamal Banks, which is not a done deal yet at all. They're trying, but I'm just saying, like, they're still working on him. And, oh, by the way, you still have Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas and Jane Greathouse and Jordan Faison and Micah Gilbert, right? So they got to get it right, man. They got to get it right, because there's a window here. And here's the key, Ryan. We talk about all this talent, but in this day and age, you start wasting that talent, it's a lot easier for that talent to say, I'm out.
That's what I was going to say, because yes, the talent's there. And I think when you're talking about the nuanced conversation of Jared Parker, just in general, you need to be able to have a real conversation of, like, for me, things are usually not as good as you think. They're usually not as bad as you think either. And you need to be able to say that Jared Parker did a lot of good things. Jared Parker exceeded a lot of expectations for most people, in my opinion, just kind of in the chat from just general over the last year. But it still needs to get better. I mean, we need to have that conversation, right? Like, it doesn't have to be everything sucks, everything's great, and there's no in between. There's no in between, right? Because there is an in between. So
that's what it's turned into, though, Ryan. Right? It's turned into, if he's not great in every single game, then he sucks, and it's like, This is nonsense.
Yes,
this is nonsense.
Agreed. But to your initial points, as far as Coach Freeman now entering his 3rd year, we always hear this, Brian. the pitch that they give to recruits and the transfers of what the vision is, right? We hear about the vision a lot. And offensively, I'm talking about speaking specifically here. At some point, the vision just becomes words, right? It just becomes words, and it doesn't mean anything if Notre Dame isn't able to show that they can develop the offensive side of the football at a higher level, certain positions, wide receiver and quarterback, most specifically here, and they can be that type of offense that they need to be in order to win a national championship. That's what they need to show that they're capable of now evolving offensively. So that offensive coordinator just conversation and the offensive coordinator hire, it's going to be big for Marcus Freeman in year 3, because at some point recruits are going to say, you've been on the job for X amount of years and I'm not seeing like a ton of progress. I'm seeing some progress, but you're telling me you want to get here. When are we expecting to get there? Right? Like, is there a 5-year plan? Like, what is the plan here ultimately? So Notre Dame needs to continue to show growth, obviously, and you need to be able to take a step forward, which is why I think this offensive coordinator hire is vital for the success of Marcus Freeman overall at the University of Notre Dame, because I already talked about stability. This is going to be your third offensive coordinator in 3 years. There's going to be some recruits that are going to be walking in and having 3 different offensive coordinators in their career.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable, man. It's not. That's where offenses lose their luster. That's where programs kind of can fall to the wayside a little bit and just go adrift for a little bit. So Notre Dame has a big opportunity. And you dropped, Brian, and I'll say this, the names that I'm hearing that Notre Dame is at least looking at and has interest in, or there's been contact with already, gives me great hope.
Yes.
It really does. The 2 names that you put on the message board that we'll talk about here, I looked at it and said, that gets me juiced. That gets me excited. I can just imagine what a recruit will think about it, or a player coming back about some of the names, obviously, that we're getting thrown out here for Notre Dame.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a couple names that we've heard so far. I'm going to drop an article later tonight with about 6 or 7 names of guys that I think Notre Dame should go after. Just so people are clear, when I have my offensive coordinator candidates article, it's going to be more about these are the candidates I believe that they should pursue and give reasons why and how I think that will go. So, Ryan, first, I mean, there's 2 names. We can talk about them now. They're out there. We put them on the board last night. The 2 names we've heard that there's some interest in now. To what level? We'll see. Is Mike Denbrock and Kirby Moore. Yep. And for me, both of these guys are absolutely guys that would be in what we're referring to. And I saw somebody, I got to pull this up because this is kind of what we're talking about. It's like, if these guys aren't good hires, like I just look at some of the responses and I'm like, guys, we're just kind of being miserable for the sake of being miserable at this point in time.
Are people upset? People are upset about those
here's
names?
one. Do we really want someone from the BK tree back? What? Do you really want to bring back the guy who coordinated the most explosive offense in Notre Dame modern history, which means going back to World War I, which is exactly what the 2015 offense did. 7 yards per play, right? I think 8 of the starters on that team were drafted on that offense were drafted. And one of them that wasn't was because he quit playing football as a junior in Steve Elmer. Otherwise, it would have been 9. Yeah, you're talking about an offense.
I heard doing incredible in the was he in finances or something like that? I heard
in DC. I mean, he got into politics, stuff like that. But he may be doing that now. But he originally, because he wanted to get into politics.
Yeah,
and you're talking about a guy that just literally just coordinated an offense that had a Heisman Trophy winner.
Sure.
Coordinated an offense that I think they led the nation in scoring this year. Yeah, they were number 1 in scoring this year by over 2 points. It's 46.4 points per game. Led the nation in offense at 547.8 yards and averaged 8.53 yards per play. The next closest was 7.8, and the next closest after that was 7.3. But we don't want that because he's from the BK tree. Let me tell you something else. Mike Denbrock was here before Brian Kelly got here. He had coached at Notre Dame before. But if that's just because we don't like Brian Kelly, I don't like Brian Kelly. But again, this does not mean that everybody that coached for Brian Kelly is a bad coach.
He's also coached other places aside from being with Brian Kelly, and
he was the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati for 2 years when they literally did not lose a regular season game for 2 whole years, including coming into Notre Dame Stadium and handing Notre Dame their only loss of the season in 2021. And so it's like, if that's not good enough for you guys, I don't know what is. And then we talk about Kirby Moore. So, well, I want someone more experienced. Okay, well, what about Mike Denbrock? Yeah, but I don't want someone from. So, who do you guys want? Is Mike Shanahan willing to come out of retirement and come coach for Notre Dame? Like, I don't know what you want, right? I really don't. But here's what I know. Okay, my opinion. These are two great hires, and
Yes.
this is the kind of coach that Marcus Freeman needs to get. When you
Agreed.
look at a guy like Mike Denbrock, here's some positives to a guy like Mike Denbrock. Number one, he's an older guy. I know he loves Notre Dame. I don't know that he'll come, right? So we'll get to that in a second. But like, I do know he loves and respects Notre Dame. That's why he came here twice for two different coaches. And he's a guy that's had really good success at three places, right? The last three places that Mike Denbrock was the offensive coordinator was at Notre Dame, where he oversaw the most explosive offense that Notre Dame's ever seen, most yards per play in a season ever. He also was a guy that went to Cincinnati after that, after he got fired from Notre Dame because of Brian Kelly's mistakes by giving Mike Sanford more control in 2016, which was a mistake. And then he goes to Cincinnati, coordinates that offense, Ryan, and they go back-to-back years and go of
Produced a
undefeated
lot of
play.
NFL talent
Right.
offensively too.
Exactly.
I mean, Desmond Ritter, Alec Pierce, Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, Jerome
At
Ford.
Cincinnati.
There's a lot of
At
NFL talent on the offensive
Cincinnati,
line.
Ryan.
Mhm.
At Cincinnati, he did that.
Yep.
And in 2 years, their two losses in those 2 years were a 3-point loss to Georgia and a 21-point loss to Alabama. Those are the games that he lost. And they went on the road and averaged 6.3 yards per play against Marcus Freeman's defense, and when Notre Dame was ranked number 8 in 2021. Like, that's what they did in those two seasons. And so,
Right.
you're talking about a guy that then goes to LSU, and their offense last year was very good.
Yeah.
I mean, like they went from 26.5 points per game in 2021 to 34.5 points per game in his first year there. They went from 368.5 yards per game, 5.4 per carry, to 453 yards and 6.4 yards per carry. Those are big jumps in 1 year. You get Jaden Daniels comes in as your quarterback. He has a pretty good first year. Second year, he wins a Heisman Trophy. And he showed that he can win with dual threat quarterbacks. I mean, he had a dual threat quarterback at Notre Dame. Deshaun Kaiser rushed for 10 touchdowns, I believe, his first year as a starter with Mike Denbrock. Desmond Ritter was a good runner. He wasn't like quite as productive, I don't believe, if I remember, like red zone wise as Deshaun Kaiser. But if I remember correctly, Ryan, he did rush for a decent amount of yards in his time at Cincinnati. 400 yards a year, actually 500 in 2020. He ran for 592 yards in 2020, and then ran for only 355 in 2021. And then of course this past year with Jane Daniels. So you talk about the direction that Notre Dame's trying to go offensively. Mike Denbrock is very much in line with that pro style spread offense that can run the football and that can take advantage of a dual threat quarterback.
Yep.
And so, I mean, there's a lot to like about that. And some of the things I've seen him evolve in over the years from when he was in Notre Dame. There's some things I didn't like about his offense when he was here. You could kind of tell where they were running based on how the tight end and back were aligned. Back then, there's some, but he doesn't. That's gone. That wasn't there at Cincinnati. It wasn't there at LSU. And he's a very good recruiter. Like, I've told this story how he punked the entire. Did I ever tell the story of how he punked the entire USC coaching staff? Did I ever tell you that?
I believe so. Yeah, I think so.
So, like, that's a guy that's got some stones and loves recruiting and loves Notre Dame. Now, again, will Mike Denbrock come to Notre Dame? I have no idea. I have my doubts. It's going to cost a lot of money to get him to consider coming to Notre Dame.
Yep.
And clearly he likes and respects Brian Kelly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to Notre Dame with him. He wouldn't have been in his wedding, and he wouldn't be working for him now at LSU after Brian Kelly fired him in 2016.
It's wild.
You know what I mean? So clearly there's a strong connection there and a relationship there. The flip side is, dude, it's never going to be better for you at LSU than it was this past year, in my opinion. Because I'm someone who doesn't believe Brian Kelly can win a championship. And you look at it, you're going to lose your Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, and you're going to replace him with AJ Swan.
Well, I'm told that AJ Swan is a little bit more of insurance in case Nussmeier isn't that guy.
And
but
I've been told they don't like that they're not high on Nussmeier.
Yes. I've also heard that, but apparently they do like Ricky Collins, so maybe that.
Well, yes, and I love Ricky Collins too. I like Ricky Collins a lot too, but he's not Jaden Daniels. And so Like Ricky's a guy that I would have taken at Notre Dame. I've talked about this. I like Ricky Collins a lot.
No
But the
doubt.
point is, Ryan, there's a lot to like there. And if you
There
put the
is.
right staff around him, you've seen what Mike Denbrock can do. And he did all that with freaking Brian Van Gorder as his defensive coordinator.
Sure.
So there's a lot to like there. Would he take the job? I have my doubts, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that Marcus Freeman's shooting for the stars, so to speak. Because again, look at the big games, Mike. I mean, Mike Denbrock has been in some big moments and coached on some really good football teams since he took over as the OC at Notre Dame. And then he went to Cincinnati and did the same thing. And then he went to, guy's done a heck of a job. And then now is what he's doing at LSU. So,
yeah.
And the game he called against Alabama in 2023 was, or 22 was excellent.
Yep.
Absolutely excellent. So there's a lot to like there. A lot to like there.
A lot. So obviously there is at least chatter that there is going to be some contact there. Well, is it likely? Probably not. Is Notre Dame going to shoot for it though? At least they're going to do their due diligence, right? And see what happens, because Marcus Freeman did coach at Cincinnati with Mike Denbrock.
Right.
Mike Brown was at Cincinnati while Mike Denbrock was there as well. So there's some relationship as far as current staff with Mike Denbrock as well. So we'll see what happens. But regardless, the fact that he's in the conversation, I think, is a great sign for Notre Dame. I think it's a tremendous sign.
I will say this. I don't believe that money is going to be an issue for Notre Dame this cycle. It's more about, does Mike Denbrock really want to make that move again? That's more what it is. The positive is if he makes that move, it's probably going to be a while. People have asked, one of the questions in the chat was there some like Notre Dame connection that I don't know about that would make Mike Denbrock want to leave the job he has? Yeah, he's a Northern guy. I mean, he's spent most of his career coaching in the North. He's very much loved Notre Dame. So but that doesn't mean he's necessarily going to, because it's not just about him. He's got a family, he's got a young wife, he's got young kids. There's a lot of, and again, great respect for Brian Kelly. So, but it won't be because of money. It won't be because Notre Dame, I don't believe, because right now, if you're Marcus Freeman, you've got your administration by the short and curlies a little bit, to pardon my expression, because the way things went down last year, there's no way that they're going to say, sorry, we're not going to pay that much to go get you an offensive coordinator this year. No way.
Agreed.
And so, but it's more about, it's going to be expensive, but it's more about, I just think Mike Denbrock's going to want to stay.
Yep.
That's what it is.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that one. Obviously, the other name for people that aren't too familiar is Kirby Moore, who is the current offensive coordinator at Missouri, who obviously Missouri's having a tremendous season under Eli Drinkwitz this year. Kirby Moore, before that, was at Fresno State during the Jake Hayner, Kalen DeBoer era of Fresno State football, where they were very successful and high flying, and he was the OC there previously, and they put up a lot of great statistics there. And yes, Kirby Moore is the younger brother, or is he younger or is he older than Kellen? I always get this wrong.
He's younger.
I think he's younger.
Yeah, he played in from 09 to 12 or something like that at Boise. And
yeah,
I think I
remember him briefly because he wore like number 30 something as a wide receiver. I was just like, what are you doing, dog? that's a different conversation though. But yes, Kirby Moore, who, Brian, by the way, Missouri this year had like a 10-point jump offensively and a ton of yards jump offensively. I mean, it's obviously not as big a track record as what we have with Mike Denbrock, for instance, right? But he has taken over and improved offenses at his previous couple spots, and he's been around a lot of great offensive minds, which I think is worthy of mentioning, obviously.
Let's start with that, Ryan, and then we'll dive into that. First, two things. Number one, I've had some people say, well, Eli Drinkwitz ran the offense of Missouri. I've been told that's not accurate. I was told that's kind of part of the conversation with Eli, with Kirby Moore even taking that job. It was going to be his offense. And you can watch what they did this year and see very much. You can see a lot more of Kirby Moore's influence at Missouri than you can see Garrett Riley's influence at Clemson, for example, as far as what he's done in past years. And so, for me, Ryan, when I look at it, it's a situation where you've got a young guy that's unproven. And so as far as like time frame, right? Like Denbrock's been doing this a long time. Like Denbrock's been calling plays since Kirby Moore was in college, right? But you've got a guy that has the pedigree. And I think that's a thing because you talked about Kalen DeBoer. You coached with Kalen DeBoer 2 years of Fresno. coached with Jeff Ted for 3 years, because he was there as a position coach for 2 years, and then in 22 he's the OC. This is also a guy that played for and coached for a year under Chris Peterson. So that's the offensive influence you talk about, Ryan. It's Chris Peterson, it's Kalen DeBoer, and it's Jeff Tedford. And you can see a little bit of all of their influence, but the guy to me who to me seems to have the strongest influence on who Kirby Moore is right now is Chris Peterson, which would make sense because he played for him. And that's where a lot of coaches have their opinions formed. Like, why does Lincoln Riley have the opinion he has as far as off? Because he played for Mike Leach at Texas Tech. You know what I mean? Like, and you're going to have a lot of that, and you can easily see that. But I think you nail it, Ryan. That pedigree is something like that, to me, can trump. He hasn't been doing it for 8 years when you look at the pedigree he's been with.
Yep. Well, I think both the coaches that we're talking about today have different allure to just players and recruits in general, because Mike Denbrock, I mean, you just look at what he did at LSU this past year, the past couple years, what he did at Cincinnati. It's a pretty easy sell as far as offensive football. Kirby Moore is a little bit of the other side of it, of like, this is the young guy, right? This is a little bit of more of a little more inexperienced comparative, but still good experience. I mean, at the end of the day, I care about quality over quantity personally, but he is a younger guy in his early 30s that has shown, because I watched a lot of Missouri film last year, and I'll say this, is that Luther Burton's a dude, right? He's a very talented player, wide receiver, sophomore wide receiver, All-American type player. But aside from that, that Missouri offense isn't too talented. I mean, it really isn't. I mean, Brady Cook's a good, solid talent as a college quarterback, but he's nothing special. They got the Schrader kid at running back, who was a Division II player originally. So, like, they're getting a lot out of, I think, pretty solid but unspectacular talent in a lot of ways. And I really have enjoyed watching the Missouri team, especially over the last day or so, as we kind of got confirmation that Kirby was at least contacted, or they have general interest there, because I think that he does a lot of good things offensively, not as much from a schematic, like this is so evolutionary and he's just doing all the, but he understands how to create mismatches. And that is what I want at Notre Dame, a guy that understands these are your best players. How do I get them in the best possible spot to create big plays and create mismatches? Boy, he did that this year at Missouri.
There's two things about that, Ryan. This is something that you and I have been talking about together since we started doing shows together. When you're an offensive coach, the best offensive coaches know how to get into favorable matchups. Not like, how can I spend the whole game figuring out how to get Marvin Harrison as many touches as possible? Sometimes it's like, you know what? I think we've got a great mismatch with Julian Fleming against so-and-so. Or this week, I think we got a great matchup with Jordan Faison. Or I think if we move Jaden Greathouse around here, we can get into different mismatches. Like, and how can I get my tight ends isolated, or how can I get my backs in space where my backs may only catch 3 balls, but they're going to go for 60 yards. You know what I mean? Total yards. It's things like that. And there's 2 ways to get there. One is just be like, run a million plays, and others is like, look, we're going to get real creative. We don't have a million plays, but we're going to run what we have a lot of different ways. And then we're going to use formations and motions and different things like that to isolate you. And I'd like for you to explain a couple of the examples that you and I were talking about before the show, Ryan, that may not seem like rocket science, but they're hard to prepare for defensively, because there's so many different things you can get out of it that easily translates to Notre Dame, and not just for slot receivers, Ryan, with Jordan Faison and Jake Greathouse, but in their 2-back looks, because Missouri doesn't have the kind of athletes in the pass game that Notre Dame has, as far as like that type of dynamic athlete. So just to give an example of these are some ways that it takes some creativity, but this isn't reinventing the wheel, that can really be effective and fits what Notre Dame does really well.
Yeah. Because, I mean, offensively, first and foremost, I already talked about the 10-point per game jump that they had this past season. They went from 24 points a game in 2022 to over 34 points a game this year. And obviously the yardage was a big increase as well. But the thing that impressed me most about creating mismatches is the talent was exactly who they had the year before. They actually had less the year before, because their leading receiver went to Georgia this past year as well. So they actually lost a prominent fixture of their offense from 2022, but they brought back exactly who they had in 2022. They had Luther Burden, they had Brady Cook, they had Schrader, they had Mookie Cooper. That's who they had as far as their skill position talent.
The only new guy that they got, Ryan, was Theo Weiss, is the only guy that they got. And as far as like you replace Dominic Lovett with him. On
Yeah,
paper, that shouldn't be a huge, like, that's not necessarily a big upgrade. I mean, Theo Weiss was
exactly.
at Oklahoma for 4 years and had never caught more than 37 passes in a season. You know, good player, but not the kind of impact we saw this year. And he just transitioned right
Well,
in. But that, I mean, like,
yeah,
that's like getting Bo Collins, right? Like
yeah,
that meaning like it's a good pickup, but it's not like you're going to have 10 points per game more because you got him in the
sure.
portal is my point.
Yeah.
Continue.
And they also improved just the efficiency stuff, right? So, like the year before, Schrader had only averaged like 4 point something yards per carry. This year, he's over 6.
Yeah.
Luther Burden in 2022, only a true freshman, but he averaged less than 10 yards per reception
Yeah.
that year. This year, he's well over 10. Like he's a 1,000-yard receiver, over 1,100 yards this year for the Missouri Tigers. And the way that they do that, folks, is like I was talking to Brian before the show about this one play in particular. They run a lot of two-back stuff out of gun and some pistol as well, but it's not two-back as what we would associate with Notre Dame, for instance, as far as like Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price from the backfield. No, they'll put one of their wide receivers in the backfield. The one example I gave was Luther Burden was in as a running back next to Brady Cook on the other side of Schrader. And they they shifted him to a wing out of a two-back set. Then they brought him back because I think what was happening, and this is just me watching film, is that I think they were trying to see who is going to move with Luther Burden, whether they when they motion him or they line him up in a different spot, who's going to move with them. So once they saw who can move with them, they motioned him into the slot from the to the weak side of the field to the short side, and they had created a mismatch with him against a linebacker. And for anybody that's seen Luther Burden this year, Luther Burden versus linebacker, not an advantageous situation for a defense. And he got a quick, easy release. I think he ran like almost like a pivot route and then one inside and created a big play there. And they do that not only with Burden, they do that with Mookie Cooper. They run a lot of swing screen stuff, but it's not anything that's super exotic as far as he runs a lot of inside zone. He runs a lot of outside zone. He loves to run to the boundary, especially, but like, it's nothing where I looked at it and I said, like, Colton Necky, that is now the offensive coordinator at Penn State. I watch his offensive Kansas. I'm like, well, that's very creative, right? They're pulling guys in different directions. They're running, they're doing a lot of eye candy stuff, a lot of pre-snap motions. Like that's stuff where I look at and say they really need to scheme open guys. I wouldn't say he's like a I don't want to say masterclass of scheme, but a guy that is just obsessed with scheme. I think he's obsessed with creating mismatches with different alignments. That's what I look at. And I say Kirby Moore just wants to get guys isolated in the right spot. And he's okay with moving guys in different personnel groupings and in different alignments to create those things. So I was incredibly impressed by what he was able to do at Missouri this year because this was his first year. You saw the improvement. You also saw what he was able to do at Fresno State the year before. By the way, he had Josh Kelly, who's now obviously at Texas Tech, but he had him at Fresno State. He had Jake Hayner. He had the other wide receiver whose name's escaping me that was a really dynamic space player as well for Fresno State the year before. Also, he understands how to get guys in good mismatches. And I think that's really because moving forward, Brian, like I'm thinking about how can we get Jeremiah Love isolated against a running back in the passing game from time to time? How can I get Cam Williams freed up against some of these guys? How can I get the Jaden Greathouses? How can I get the Jordan Faisons? How can I Eli Raridans getting these guys in advantageous situations? I think Kirby Moore's a master of that.
When you look at what he did with Jake Hayner, Ryan, in his 1 year as the coordinator, remember Jake Hayner got hurt that year and was kind of beat up and only played 10 games. But in that one season, he completed 72% of his passes and had 20 touchdowns and 3 picks. I mean, pretty good year. And again, that's for a guy that was pretty banged up, missed 4 games.
Yep.
And, like I said, did some very, very good things, including looking great against Washington State in the bowl game last year. And also against Oregon State. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to pull this up. So in 2022, Oregon State against USC and Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams held him to 44.4% completion percentage, 180 yards, 5.0 yards per play, 1 touchdown, 0 picks, and a 95.61 passer rating. 2 weeks before that, Jake Hayner threw for 360 yards, completed 63% of his passes, and they lost to Fresno, or they lost to Oregon State 35-32 and that was a really good defense that year. So Jake Haener had more passing yards against them than Cam Ward did, more than Bo Nix did, more than Caleb Williams did, more than Michael Penix did. They faced all those teams. And the only quarterback that had a higher yards per attempt average against them was Bo Nix by 0.2 yards last season.
Yeah.
That's it. And so just to give you some context of kind of the things that he does or he did, and then, of course, Jake Haener got hurt, missed 4 games, and then came back and played pretty well from the time. I mean, when he came back from injury, he had, 16 touchdowns and 2 picks in the 7 games that he came back from. So this is a really a good offensive mind. I love the lineage. I love the fact he coached. I mean, that was a friend of mine's biggest concern about Jared Parker was who's the great coach that he really learned under. Yeah, it was David Cutcliffe for 2 years, but other than that, like Ricky Rain, guys like that. And then you look at this kid, and that's all he's ever been under. Is that I mean, his whole career, player and as a coach, is under great offensive minds. Guys that right now we look at and say these are some of the best minds in college. And Jeff Tedford is also for a long time has been considered one of the best minds in college football and did some really good things at Cal.
His brother's also an offensive coordinator
Right.
in the NFL. So, yeah, I mean, that's even extended into the Moore household, to your point.
Right. Well, and somebody told me his dad was like a legendary coach in high school in the state of Washington.
I can believe it.
Which, exactly. And so that tracks very well with Kirby Moore. Now, again, I don't know that these are definitely guys that they're going to hire because those guys got to accept jobs and I don't know what the preference is, but I do believe those are 2 guys that are on the radar. And I hear consistently from good sources about, on both sides of some of these to say, hey, this is something that they're definitely looking at. And look, I'll just say this, Ryan, when you're going to make a hire, it's got to be something like this. Yes. If you don't get somebody like this, then it's just you don't understand what you need to do on offense to win. That's as simple as that. You've got to make them. Hey, identify the guys you want and go get them. Because to me, these are both the guys that have shown throughout their entire careers know how to maximize the talent that they have on their roster. Yep. And with all due respect to Desmond Ridder, Notre Dame is going to have multiple quarterbacks on their roster the next 2 years with more God-given ability than Desmond Ridder, in my opinion. And that's not a knock on Desmond Ridder. It was a 3rd-round draft pick. Has started games in the NFL. Kid's got ability. But they're going to have at least 3 guys over the next few years. They're going to have more God-given ability than he does in different ways. And so, and look, again, they had a great receiving core in 2021, Mike Denbrock. But, and you're also talking about guys that have shown they can take a product and make it a lot better. That's the other big thing, Ryan. Like,
well, Jaden Daniels was broken when he got to LSU. Even I mean, he was broken.
Well, I mean, we talked about. I mean, I'll point it out again, Ryan. I mean, just look at the progress that LSU made, and then I'll do the same thing in Missouri just to kind of point it out. But LSU, in the year before Mike Denbrock took over, was scoring 26.5 points per game. They jumped up to 34.5 the next year, and then jumped up to 46.4 this year. And you look at their total offense, they went from 368 yards and 5.4 yards per play in year 1 to 453 and 6.4 in year 2 to 547.8 to 8.5 in year 3. I also think the notion that everything they did that was off script is a big misnomer. Yes, Jaden Daniels did a lot of things off script, but they did a lot of stuff within the framework of the offense as well that is very impressive. And also, again, you want a coach that knows how to put a quarterback in position to make plays off script. That's part of designing an offense. Is if this doesn't break down, we need to have the protection set in a way, the formation set in a way where the quarterback can take off and run, which is exactly what you need when you're bringing in a guy like Riley Leonard and Deuce Knight, right? You look at like I said, total offense 547.8 and 8.5 yards per play in his last year. And the other thing too is, they averaged 114.1 yards per game on the ground the year before he got there. That jumped up to 183.7 the next year, and then this year 213.5. Now, a lot of that was quarterback runs, and I would hope that they don't have to rely on it. But the problem they had this year is so many of their running backs kept getting hurt. But their top 3 running backs all averaged over 5 yards a carry this season on what I thought was a solid but a bit overrated offensive line in that it was a finalist for the Joe Moore Award. I didn't I didn't see that. I thought Jaden Daniels got hit a lot. So, I mean, there were some things there, but, again, huge improvement from where they started. Let's look at Missouri, Ryan, and what we saw at Missouri. How Eli Drinkwitz is in what, year 3?
I thought it was 4. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, you're probably right. It's because he was there. His first year would have been the COVID year, right? Then in that case. So yeah, 2020.
Yep.
So you look at what Eli Drinkwitz did the years before in his first year: 26.7 points per game, 29.1, and 24.8. This year they jumped up to 34.1. His first 3 years: 402 yards, 5.6 per play, 413.7 yards, 5.9 yards per play, dipped to 367.6 yards, 5.4 yards per play. And this past year jumped up to 442.9 at 6.6 yards per play. So again, noticeable jumps from where they were before.
Yeah.
And I mean, and look, I would argue, Ryan, that just the God-given talent he had in previous years was, I think, a little bit better than what they had this past year in certain areas, especially running back. Like Tyler Batty was a really good college running back. And Cody Schrader was a 4.4 yards per carry. Their top 5 running backs in 2022, the year before Kirby Moore took over, their running backs were 4.38, 4.21, quarterback 4.25, 4.89. And the 4.89 guy only had 19 carries. Actually, Luther Burden tied for the lead in yards per carry amongst guys with more than 10 carries at 4.89. 2022, their starting running back had 6.07 yards per carry.
Yep.
And, very, very good production. Their quarterback was at 8 rushing touchdowns this season. But their biggest jump came in the pass game. I mean, that's really where you saw a jump. They went from 212.9 yards per game. Brady Cook had 14 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 7.1 yards per attempt, 64.7% completion. Comes out this year, completion percentage goes up to 66.4 for a kid who's not super accurate, to be honest with you. And his went up to 265.8 yards per game. Excuse me, the starter the year before was at 209.5. The team was at 212.9. So the starter was at 209.5 yards per game. And 7.1 yards per attempt, 14 touchdowns, and 7 picks. This year he jumps up, and the starting quarterback accounts for 28 touchdowns, 20 passing, 8 rushing, only 6 picks. And he completes 66.4% of his passes and jumps up to 265.8. As a team, they jump up to 273.5. So that's a 60-point jump, despite losing their best receiver to Georgia through the portal the next year.
Productive for sure, yeah.
Right,
yeah.
right. And you mentioned earlier about the jump for Luther Burden, Ryan. As a true freshman, Luther Burden had a nice year. 45 catches, 375 yards, 6 touchdowns, 8.3 yards per carry. In year 2, part of it was they moved him to a different position. That was part of the process. 83 catches, 1,197 yards, 14.4 yards per catch, 8 touchdowns. They had 4 receivers with at least 12 catches for over 300 yards because Marquise Johnson had 12 catches for 333 yards this year, 27.8 yards per catch, 3 touchdowns on 12 catches. So now they didn't use their tight end a ton, but that's not something that's building around what you have.
Yes.
They shouldn't have used their tight end a ton, right?
When you have Luther Burden and Theo Weiss and Mookie Cooper, I probably wouldn't throw the tight end so much either.
And your tight end is Brett Norfleet, who's okay. You're not going to be throwing to him as much.
Sure.
So, Ryan, those are my thoughts on the 2 guys that we have now. We'll talk about some more guys as we hear names, like legitimate names. I'll have an article out later today that's going to kind of break down who I like as offensive coordinators, and these 2 guys will be in it who I would pursue if I was Notre Dame. And some of them I like a lot. Some of them are guys that I think are at least worth talking to. Like, I was a little skeptical of Willie Corn in the past, but I really love what they did at Liberty this year. I mean, their offense was explosive. They did it with a different quarterback, different players, than they did at Coastal. So there'll be some guys like that. Alex Atkins will be a guy that I talk about. We both love Jason Candle. I'll talk about him. And I'll talk about whether I think they're realistic options or not, or what the concerns are. So it'll be, here's what I like, and here's would be some of the drawbacks or question marks you'd have to answer. But the point is, Ryan, this is the kind of guy they have to get. These 2 guys this is the caliber whether it's a veteran with a proven track record or a young up and comer that, boy, has got a lot of potential and talent. And then the key is when Marcus Freeman, whoever he brings in, he's got to say, your goal is to build an efficient, explosive offense. None of this, we're going to complement the defense crap that we've seen. We're going to go out, no matter who we're playing, and be an efficient, explosive offense. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to say, well, we're going to accept 20 turnovers because we're trying to be efficient and explosive. That's not a thing. That's not how it has to be. And so it's going to have to be that. I mean, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have a situation where you understand as the head coach that we have to be dynamic on offense, because that's the only way we can win. We're not going to win 21-17 in the national championship game. Just not going to happen. We've got to be able to score. Your defense did everything it needed to do this year against Clemson to win that football game, and it didn't matter. I mean, against Ohio State, because it didn't matter because your offense couldn't get the job done. And that's where they're at. That's been true. I mean, not many people could hold that 2018 Clemson offense to only 30 points. I mean, that was actually and Ryan, the last touchdown that they got was because Notre Dame was down 23-3 and needed to make a play, so they were bringing more aggressive run stunts, which is why Travis Etienne ripped off that long run. He's not doing that if it's a close game and Notre Dame's still playing their base defense. He's not. And so they did as good of a job as anybody against that defense. But guess what? They couldn't score, so it didn't matter. And that's where they've got to get to. And Coach Freeman has to understand that, right? You lost to Georgia in the Peach Bowl because you couldn't score enough points. You know, your defense played great. You held Georgia to 24 points. You held them to 40-some rushing yards. Didn't matter. You only scored 21 points, right? And that's he's got to get out of that Luke Fickell, Jim Tressel notion of, you know, we're going to win games 24-17, 21-14. Got to be able to score. And this hire is going to tell us a lot, because this is a huge offseason for him, Ryan. You're hiring a strength coach and an OC. Those are two huge hires, and you got to get them both right. He's got about 1,000 this offseason, Ryan, if Notre Dame's going to have a shot to take that next level. Because eventually, if you keep making these mistakes, the shine comes off.
And you stop getting shots. Yeah,
exactly. But if you hit home runs this summer or this offseason, Ryan, now the guy we think you can be is who this program becomes. And that's how Notre Dame takes their potential and turns it into production. And that's the key. This offense had a lot of potential. We saw it at times, but it just couldn't get there when it mattered most. They're going to have to bring in an OC that does that, and the head coach is going to have to demand that from them. Not just let them do it, but demand it from them. And that's the decision that Coach Freeman's going to have to make. So this is a very big – these next 2 weeks are going to be huge for Marcus Freeman in determining ultimately what he's going to be known as at Notre Dame. It's not the end-all, be-all, but we're getting to that point where you got to start getting these right. You got to start getting them right.
Well, the next couple of weeks are going to be super busy, folks. Obviously, the offensive coordinator conversation will be a big part of it. Strength and conditioning coach will be a big part of it, and that search and obviously solidifying things there. National Signing Day tomorrow. If you're listening to us on a Tuesday, it is Wednesday. December 20th is National Signing Day. We also have, obviously, a bowl game that's coming up pretty soon. Notre Dame's playing Oregon State, in case anybody forgot about that one. And also, All-American Bowl, the 6th of January, be down in San Antonio, Texas. So a lot of content that's going to be coming out, a lot of news, a lot of conversation. So make sure you hit that like button below us. Subscribe to the podcast, notification bell as well, and go to boards.irishbreakdown.com, because if you want more names that could potentially be on the offensive coordinator conversation, the minute we have them and we can put them out to the world, they will be on the message board first and foremost. So make sure to go for that exclusive content. We're going to get in the mailbag next, folks. We want to thank you so much, though, for being here on this portion of the Irish Breakdown podcast. All right, mailbag. So if anybody hasn't been here before, MB before the chat, mailbag before the question. Make sure that we can distinguish what is a mailbag question and what is just general chatter. I know we're going to have a lot of great questions here today, obviously.
Yeah, we do. We got 20 so far. I'm sure we're going to pop up some more here. And I guess, a shocker, Ryan, a lot of them have to do with the offensive coordinator position.
Yes.
We told you we'd get to it, Ryan. We said, just be patient. Let some news get there, and then we'll have a whole show dedicated to it.
Yep.
I promise.
And here we are. Jordan Pinero kicking us off. Pure speculation, but if you were a betting man, what would your odds be that we hire either Mike Denbrock or Kirby Moore.
I mean, for me, it's a little too early for that, Ryan. It's a
Yeah.
little too early for me to start speculating that they will hire the odds. I mean, this is still kind of new. I've heard some people ask, this was Jared Parker being forced out. I don't believe that's true. I mean, my sources that I've talked to said, no, he was not going to be forced out. He always wanted to be head coach. This all happened within the last week or so. It didn't happen Sunday night. Like, he didn't call Freeman and was like, by the way, I'm leaving for the Troy job. I mean, this has been in the works for maybe about a week or so. But, my thoughts are that there's two things going on here. And we learned this basically from something that I was told talking to somebody close to Coach Freeman about the Mike Brown situation. And that is that he had Mike Brown on kind of on his radar. And then when I'm hearing some things from sources about the OC stuff, it's very clear to me that Marcus Freeman is doing now, and I don't know if he's done this before, if this is new or if he did this last year. It's very clear to me that Marcus Freeman's starting to accumulate sort of a list of, if this job comes open, I'm going for those guys. You've got to be that way as a coach. You can't lose a guy and just be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do now. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
you can't
there's
pivot.
you've got to like, hey, this guy does a great job with this position group. That guy does a great job with that position group. You have to have kind of an idea. And so you're seeing more of that that Notre Dame was interested in Kirby Moore. Well, why? Who? How? For what reason? Other than you've got a head coach that's, when the time is right, has an idea of, if a job comes open, these are the type of guys that I'm going to go after.
Because Kirby Moore's not like a super mainstream name as far as like, if you just blankly told someone, give me your top 5 to 10 OCs in college football without doing research, I don't think most people Kirby Moore would be on the short list of your minds. But then you start doing research, you're like, oh, okay, I like what he's done in a lot of different spots. That's very interesting. So as of right now, like Jordan, I agree with Brian. I think it's too early to just really quantify it with like numbers and percentages and that type of thing. I will say, Brian, just from my perspective, just early on conversation is, I would say Kirby Moore's probably more likely than Mike Denbrock right now, but like that's obviously an early take right now. So.
Yeah. And it's not even 1A, 1B for me. It's just 1 and 1. I mean, they'd both be home run hires, in my opinion, from what I've learned so far. I know more about Mike Denbrock than Kirby Moore. So if you were to ask me where I'd lean, it would be that way, just because of the known. But everything I've learned so far about Kirby Moore has been impressive. And then you look at the lineage and so like, looking at his resume, Ryan, this is something that I found interesting. So when he took over, or when Kalen DeBoer took over at Fresno, he actually kept Kirby Moore on and promoted him. So usually when a coach comes on, it's because, he's coming on because things didn't go well. And that's kind of what happened at Fresno when
Especially
Kirby,
minds.
Right. Yeah. So like Fresno went 4-8 and made the stupid decision to fire Jeff Tedford, in my opinion. I'm sorry, it just was. But they overcame their stupidity of firing him, because he had gone 12-2 and 10-4 the 2 previous years, and hired Kalen DeBoer, which was smart. But they went 4-8 the year before. And then Kalen DeBoer, who we would all agree knows a little something about offense, decides to not only not fire Kirby Moore, but he promoted him. Went from just the receivers coach to the pass game coordinator and receivers coach. And then, of course, he was the OC when Tedford came back in 2022. And they had a really nice year then as well. So, I like the track record I've learned. But again, I've watched so much film of Mike Denbrock calling offensive plays, just from the time he was at Notre Dame, and then obviously what they did at Cincinnati when we were preparing for that game, breaking down that game, and then obviously what he's done at LSU. So just a little bit more familiar with him. But from what I know about Kirby, and then what I hear from other people in the business, you love what you hear so far, Ryan.
Absolutely.
Because, like, can I ask you a question? Like, when you think of a guy for Notre Dame that's going to be an OC, I've got to be wowed as soon as I start watching film.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's got to jump out to me right away. It can't just be like, well, eventually I kind of liked what I saw and he did some nice things.
Can't be a slow burn.
Can't be a slow burn. Okay. Yeah. You got to notice things right away, right? I mean,
it's like in the scouting world where it's like, slow burn prospects, like cool. Like eventually you get through the film and you're like, okay, I can see it a little bit. Like that's cool. Like we can work with that. No, I mean, I agree. I think especially offensive coordinator and with how how college football is played in today's game, it's like you need to see something unique and different, whether that is a scheme approach, whether that is just a general understanding of creating mismatches, whether that is just a flow of the game. I mean, you need some type of wow factor. I would agree
Mhm.
because it's hard to keep recruits now, man. Like it's hard to keep players now. So you need to be able to have something tangible where they're like, man, that's exciting. Like that. I can
Mhm.
dig that. Right. So yeah.
Yep.
We had another question from Ryan Schulte who says, also 20 personnel for the bowl game. Who is at wide receiver? What is your favorite run? What are you countering with? Favorite pass concept? What are you countering with? Whoa, man.
That's a lot, Ryan.
That's a lot of
20
questions.
personnel for the bowl game. Who's in at receiver? It'll be who's in when they're also in 11 personnel. It'll be Jaden
Yeah.
Greathouse at Z. It'll
Yep.
be Jordan Faison at F, and then it'll be Jaden Thomas as the starter. But throughout the game, they're going to work in KK Smith. They're going to work in Deion Colsey. They're going to work in Matt Salerno. So we'll see different guys at different times. I mean, there are only 6 scholarship receivers, and I expect them all to play in the bowl game.
As they should.
Right. And then the two backs, some combination of Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Jabron Payne, and Devin Ford at times too. Because like Devin Ford brings some value because he can catch the football.
And
he's also, yes, exactly, Ryan. He's proven he can be a good pass blocker. Because you have to have that out. You can't just have 5 guys that can't block because eventually teams are going to say, okay, we're just going to overload you and hope that you don't have time to get the ball off.
Yeah.
You need to be able at times to max pro. Like that's something I don't think Notre Dame does a good enough job of. And one of the things why I love 20 personnel. 11 personnel, because I grew up, my favorite formation growing up as a kid, Ryan, was 11 personnel, but with a tight end kind of moving around.
Yeah.
Because then you could kind of,
like
I could still, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Because I could then do things where I'm play action. I can run the football. I can get them, aligned over here. I can move them back. I can show them over here. And then, we run outside zone to that side. I can move them over here and then come back cross block on inside zone.
Or you can just attach them if you wanted to, right?
Yes. And he could wrap up inside and lead. There's so many things you can bootleg to him. But then also I can get 7-man protection and be spread out and do some things on you throwing the football wise too. And if you remember, Florida State did a ton of 20 personnel back in the day. Like when Florida State, like under like the Charlie Ward, when Mark Richt was their OC, they did a ton of 20 personnel with a true fullback. And that's what I loved that type of stuff. Steve Spurrier used to do a ton of that stuff at Florida back in the day. And so there's some merit to it even now today if you have the right personnel. And so Notre Dame can get to that, but you have to have a guy that can block at times in that. And Devin Ford can certainly do that.
I felt like Urban Meyer did a lot of that too at Florida, a lot of 2021 stuff because they obviously had guys like Jeff Demps and Chris Rainey and like those types of dudes as well. So,
and they would also do some 11 stuff with the way they used their crazy tight end back then is they would kind of move him around a little bit too, Ryan, and get him in some
pretty
ISOs.
Talented, man.
Yeah, he was
pretty talented.
Get him in some good leverage situations in the run game. So
agreed.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm looking at I cannot believe how many people care about how I comb my hair or whether I am or am not wearing a hat. It's a little wild. I thought apparently our conversation's just not riveting enough for people to care about whether or not I comb my hair a certain way or we're not wearing hats. But I do think this is the first time you and I have ever done a show where we're both not wearing hats.
So I love wearing hats, but also, hats are a necessity at times, especially when you haven't had a haircut in a little bit, like that's kind of my thought process.
Like, no, I didn't forget my hat. Got my hat here. Got hats over here.
I got hats somewhere over here.
Plenty of hats. I just didn't feel like putting a hat on today.
Well, I can put on so for Halloween, Juliet was Elsa from Frozen. I can put her wig on if people would like me to do that.
There you go.
There it is.
Please don't. Please don't.
Sounds good. We'll do.
Please don't.
We'll not do.
But those girls were adorable on Halloween though, Ryan, by the way.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. We had Chief Brody with a super chat. Thank you so much, sir. Charlie Weiss Jr., 2,000-yard receivers and 1,000-yard running back this year.
No. Just no.
I haven't done enough. Look, I'm always hesitant because I need to do a little bit more deep dive into Charlie Weiss Jr. as an offensive play caller, but ultimately I always hesitate with I love Lane Kiffin as an offensive mind for one, right? And sometimes because this is like the fine line here, the fine line of guy having that lineage, being around a lot of great offensive minds, right? But then there's the other side of it where is Charlie Weiss Jr. alone in calling an offensive game plan? I'm not sure about that, right? Like, how much input does a guy like Lane Kiffin have? Because, I mean, you're seeing that like today, Brian, like there's a lot of, I mean, there's some of those coaching trees, quote unquote, where it's just like, yeah, it's great that they were under him, but like also they didn't have any control of what they were doing off. I'm not saying that that's the case with Charlie Weiss Jr. I'm just saying like that's a cautionary tale sometimes where it's like, a guy under a great offensive coordinator or a great offensive coach, for instance, maybe he doesn't have full control there. Maybe he's a little bit of I don't want to call him a puppet, but like partially a puppet. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of a fine line there, I think. So I don't know enough about Charlie Weiss Jr. though, other than the fact that he's Charlie Weiss's kid and he's had some offensive success.
I also don't know that you can replicate what Lane Kiffin does. Some coaches are just so unique in how they go about their business, and they just have that knack
like
for
Chip
it.
Kelly, like a assistant of Chip Kelly. It's like, Chip's just so different with how he calls an offensive game plan. You know what I mean? So yeah,
right.
Agree there. It's like I don't want any Andy Coltonecki, assistants either.
Yeah,
it's like
that's him. That's just right. That's him.
Yeah.
That's him. It's a feel, exactly. And Lane's just got a great feel.
Yes,
I feel we need to run this call here, like the what was the I'm trying to remember. He called some kind of gimmicky kind of call in the bowl game or the title game against Clemson in 15. It was just this back and forth game. And they needed a big play, and he called, and it ended up being that long touchdown pass to OJ Howard. And I can't remember. I don't know if it was like a flea flicker or what it was, but it was like some kind of. I have to go back and watch it again. But you're just like, if you call that play 2 series before, 2 series after, it may not work.
Yeah.
It just it's that feel, and that's what the great ones have. They have a great feel for what to do and when to do it, and you can't always repeat that.
Yeah.
What's great about a guy like Mike Shanahan, Ryan, is there's foundational principles that make him so successful, and then you can kind of take it and tinker with it, right? There's a philosophy there, but you're not going to be like him. Lane Kiffin is more. It's not so much about scheme. The scheme's great, but it's how he uses it that makes him special as a play caller, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, yeah, because it's not all scheme, right? It's about the flow of a game. It's about general feel of what to call, when to call it, type of thing. I mean, for as not great of a person as Lane Kiffin is, and everything's publicized out there, right? Like I'm not breaking news there, but he is a genius offensive play caller. There's no doubt about that. He's one of a short list of outstanding offensive coordinators in college football.
Yeah, he is. I have a super sticker from Scott Gibbs. Scott, thank you very, very much. Appreciate you.
Another super chat from Raymond Harton. Thank you so much, Raymond. Hit a home run this offseason, Coach Marcus Freeman. Go Irish. Beat the Beavers. Still so funny that there's a beaver emoji. I love it.
Yep.
We had another one from Trash. Trash, thank you so much for the super chat, sir. Very excited for next season. Talent everywhere in the locker room. Year 3 is big. I was disappointed last time, and I hope for a different result. Thank you, IB. Thank you, sir.
I wasn't as disappointed in the hire Jared Parker. I learned some things and felt that there's some potential there. I've pushed back on some people. I think what happened with Jared Parker is people hated the process, and he just caught the brunt of it.
Freeman got handcuffed, and
exactly. And so he just kind of caught the brunt of it, and everything that went wrong, it was like, yes, it's because he hired an incompetent guy, and then whenever they scored points, it's like, well, of course they did. He only scored against the bad teams. I'm like, name me a single other Notre Dame coach that ever did that to the quote unquote bad teams. And like I had a guy say, well, they never did that against anybody good. And I was like, you do know that NC State finished the year 9-3 and ranked in the top 20, right? You know what I mean? Like, he did that against Navy. And I was like, yeah, barely beat Navy last year with Alabama's offensive coordinator. Like, he did some very good things, but he was just always punished because of the process. He was the ball guy because of the process. And then when he did things that every other coordinator's done, it just was amplified because of the failure of the process.
Agreed. The process was very bad. It was a very bad process last year. Yes.
Terrible.
I think we could all agree there. While we might disagree with Coach Parker and how well he did or how well he didn't do, I think most of us could agree that it was a very bad process last time.
You think he should have been the hire from day one and think he was phenomenal this year, you should still be able to look at him, but then you should have freaking promoted him on day one and not gone through this whole thing of you offer Colin Klein the job, then you don't offer the job, and then you offer Andy Ludwig the job, but you don't know what the buyout is. And it's just like, this is It's a Mickey Mouse operation right here, man. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yes.
It has to be cleaner and crisp and more definitive of who you want, go get them, and then, like, look, we're going to figure this out.
Yep.
And it's going to be the process has to be better. Notre Dame just has to look more sharp in this process. That's
coordinated. Yes.
Like, I'll tell you right now, like, the guy and knew there was no process. There was no external search. It was, you're gone, you're hired. I know who I want, and I know what I want, and I know the type of coach I want, and I know he's it. I don't need to do some fake, let me talk to this guy, that guy. Who does my OC like? Like, I asked about this. I said, did Gino Guidugli or Jared Parker have any say in who the receivers coach was? Because remember, the previous OC had it. He's like, nope. It was, this is who I'm hiring. Get to know him. You'll love him. This is who I'm hiring. Yeah. Great. Right. You're the freaking head coach, right? If the OC doesn't like the guy you want, then so what? If you believe that strongly in a hire, you've got to go make it. And I believe this is 100% my opinion, Ryan. I think he regrets that he didn't make the push for Jamarcus Shepard and instead went with the pick that his OC wanted. And I think he's regretted that ever since. And he wasn't going to let that happen this time. That's just my opinion. Yeah. And that's if I'm right, and I actually think I am right, that's growth. And that's okay. I made this mistake once. I don't care what Jared, not that he doesn't care, but like it doesn't matter because I don't need to ask their opinion because I know who I want. And I know the kind of coach I want. You go get them. I thought that was great. And you need to have that sense of purpose with the OC hire as well.
Yep.
Big time. There's one question people had. Kirby Moore's a quarterback's coach.
Yeah.
And so that's a concern for some. Kirby Moore has spent more years coaching receivers, and he also played receiver. He
played wide receiver, yeah.
I can promise you that is an easy transition to that position to tight ends. I promise you.
Yep.
It's a very easy. Now, and anything that you need to, you can learn, you can work with your offensive line coach, and you hire a GA that can specialize in some of the blocking things that you'll need some help with. And so that's the least of my concerns, because if you are not a smart enough coach to be able to coach quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers and tight ends, then you're probably not a great offensive coordinator. Offensive line's a little different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can be a quarterback's coach that couldn't teach the day-to-day techniques of offensive line, but if you're a skill coach and you can't coach tight ends in today's game, 30 years ago, different story, Ryan, because your tight ends were basically but that's why back in the day you had center guard coaches and tackle tight end coaches. You know what I mean? Because they were more linemen. If you can't coach tight ends today, then you shouldn't be coaching the University of Notre Dame. Simple as that.
Also, not only that, but I would actually also theoretically, let's say Kirby Moore is the guy. He's a tight ends coach, offensive coordinator. I also like that you now have two guys on the staff that have experience coaching quarterbacks. I really like that. I think that is a big bonus potentially for Notre Dame, but just my opinion on that one.
And one of them looks at quarterbacks as a former quarterback, and one of them would look at it from a big picture installing. This is what I believe in
perspective. Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yep.
Right.
Agreed.
Right. That would be, that'd be nice to see.
Yes.
And one last super chat here, and we'll get back to the top for questions.
Thank you, Trash. Appreciate it again. Do you like coach audio in quarterback helmets for college football?
I don't have a problem with it. It just has to be implemented correctly. You can't implement it the same way you do in the NFL. It's just people have to understand this. It structurally can be the same. I'm talking implementing, meaning from a coaching standpoint, because you don't have. I mean, Sean McVay can line up and tell Jared Goff something because Jared Goff's 30 years old, and he's been in the NFL for a long time. You're not going to be able to do that if you have a redshirt freshman quarterback. There's more communication that's needed, but there's certainly merit to it on both sides of the ball. There's merit to it.
I don't dislike it at all. I think for me, I think there's going to be a competitive balance in college football because it's still going to be baseline, making sure a player understands fully what is expected on each snap, and then kind of because why is the helmet communication important, Brian? It's case especially later in the allowance of it. It's if I want to change a play, right? Like, what front am I seeing? Are we going to switch the play here? Like that type of. You still have to be a teacher though at the baseline, right? Like, it doesn't change the baseline of like you need to understand what this offense is, what these plays are, what you need to do in certain situations. That stuff doesn't change. I think it just is a little bit of a help in kind of verbiaging. I don't even know if that's a word,
Yeah.
but being able to parlay what you want on each
Right.
given snap, which I think is good.
Right.
Verbiage. I don't know
Yeah.
if there's a verb there.
I
don't think there's a verb there.
completely missed this first super chat from AST
Huh.
12321. My bad, man. I was, for some reason, I scrolled down and did not get all the way back up. This is at the very top, so I completely missed it. My bad, buddy.
Oh, thank you so much. And the super chat says, so can we comfortably say that CJ Carr will win the 2025 Heisman Trophy?
Absolutely not. I love the sarcasm there, and I'm very excited about CJ Carr. But yes, we will pump the brakes a little bit on that. Because again, Ryan, what we saw today says this kid can spin it and he carries himself great, but it doesn't say can he build his body up? Does he have the mental toughness, physical toughness, all those type of things? Can he read defenses? Those things are going to get answered in further practices and games.
I know we've seen second year, like redshirt freshman quarterbacks win the award more recently than we did like a long time ago, but still not a long list of players that have accomplished that, right? Like that's Johnny Manziel, Jameis Winston. It's still not a long list of guys, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
let's not put unrealistic expectations on a very good player. Hopefully he develops
Right.
into that type of kid.
Right. I mean, look, I graded him as a 5-star. Like, I think, Ryan, you have him at the very least as a top 50 player. Am I correct on that?
Yes, correct. Yep.
A guy like that has the potential to be that, but there's a long way between where you are right now as a prospect and being that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reality is, for his first 3 years of his career and most of his fourth year, nobody looked at Jayden Daniels was like, future Heisman winner right there. Right? It's all about the development. And then and to me, what Jaden Thomas showed this year is just a different mindset. He just played with a different sense of urgency this year, just a much different view of command. And you can't dismiss the fact that this was his 5th year playing college football. I mean, not 5th year on a team. He literally played 5 years of college football because of the COVID year. He got an extra year.
Yeah. And he showed great improvement. I was told by a staffer over at LSU that he was in the facility every day at 5 a.m. watching film, and that's the stuff that goes unseen.
Yep, absolutely.
We had a question from A-Bent ND. 2 years in a row, Notre Dame takes a portal quarterback, and 2 years in a row, the offensive coordinator who recruited him leaves. Does this affect anything with the portal class? Any concerns that Riley Leonard might not fit the new OC?
It would be foolish of me to say that it's not a concern since we don't know who the OC is going to be.
Definitely at least a conversation.
There's certainly some OCs that he would not fit. The good news is the two that we have a pretty good, I don't want to say like 1,000% certain, but we have a pretty good feeling that there's been some level of expression of we are interested. Yep. Both would fit Riley Leonard very well.
Agreed.
That's the positive sign. And part of it is because that's why Jared Parker was hired, because Jared Parker's vision of where he wanted an offense to be from just a structural standpoint is very in line with what Marcus Freeman wants. Because Marcus Freeman's a defensive coach. And what's the biggest pain in the butt to defensive coaches? Mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't have to be Deuce Knight. I mean, CJ Carr can hurt you with his legs. It's just a lot differently than the way Deuce Knight hurts you with his legs. And that's the key is, that's ultimately kind of where they want to take this offense. So it increases the odds you're going to hire a guy like that. But if I was one of the transfers, I'm not going to lie, I'd be a little bit uncertain. But that's why Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden and the other offensive coaches have had to meet with these guys, and they have, and said, look, here's the vision. This isn't going to change. Yes, Jared Parker's leaving, but Jared Parker is running the offense that I wanted him to run. I'm going to go hire somebody else that runs an offense that's going to be what I want him to run. Meaning, like, they're going to have a belief system that fits with what I do.
Sure.
And when you watch Mike Denbrock, we know that because, we know that one's true. Yeah. But then when you watch what Kirby Moore did this year at Missouri, you're like, okay, that very much fits in line with who Notre Dame is as a football team. And so it would make sense. And the guy he's going to have a quarterback in Notre Dame is a lot more mobile than the guy had last year. And Brady Cook's not a stiff. But Riley Leonard's a much more dynamic athlete, in my opinion, and runner than Brady Cook. And he still had designed runs for Brady Cook.
Yep.
And it's going to be expanded even more with, because Jake Haener wasn't a guy you were running a bunch of that stuff with at Fresno.
He was a solid, like, springy pocket guy. He wasn't
right.
A runner,
His playmaking with his feet was more slide up into the pocket away from the rush and throw it.
You know, a second.
Yeah. It was not like he is now. So you talk about two completely different types of quarterbacks that he's had success with, and that'll fit to me.
I really like Jake Haener, man. He's a good player.
Yeah,
He's a really good player.
Yeah, needs to work on his photo shoot poses, but other than that, he's pretty,
man.
he's pretty good.
Yep.
But Abe Ben, honestly, that's going to be a concern until we know who the new coordinator is. And because again, that's something we said about. I mean, it would be very hypocritical of us to just assume, oh no, they're going to hire a guy that's going to fit with. I mean, because we don't know that answer.
Agreed.
But I promise you this, Abe Ben, we will discuss that when a hire's made about how that guy fits into the current roster, especially the who we expect to be the quarterback for next year.
And the good thing about this year is if it is one of the couple guys we talked about today, or even someone similar from a philosophical approach perspective, we'll be able to have like more of a tangible understanding of if it'll fit. I mean, like, because Jared Parker, when he was hired, we're just like, we had to figure out what he liked, right? It's like, what does he like? What does he believe in? Like, we never like tangibly really seen a Jared Parker led offense. So it was just a guessing game at that point.
Because he was running Neil Brown's offense at West Virginia. He wasn't even the play caller at what he only. My understanding is the only plays he called were red zone plays. That's it. It was more suggestions to Neil Brown. That's what I was told, and that's not what I was told from Jared Parker or anyone at Notre Dame. That's what I was told by people that covered West Virginia. That's what they would tell me about it. So, to your point, Ryan, it's like I don't really know what people tell me. You and I have talked about this on the show. This is what we think the offense is going to look like under Jared Parker, but we don't know because he didn't have those pieces in place. We're projecting based off the quarterbacks they're recruiting that this is what we think it's going to be.
Right.
But it wasn't like what it became.
Yeah. And if Kirby Moore is the hire, let's say, like, I will have a very much deeper understanding of what Kirby Moore possibly wants in a quarterback, because we've actually seen quarterbacks under Kirby Moore, and we've seen the offense that they want to run under Kirby Moore. So, yeah,
exactly. And we know who his. There's some consistent philosophical stuff to the three main coaches he's worked under.
Sure.
Not scheme wise, but philosophically, balance. Moving guys around, different personnel, things like that. Kalen DeBoer has a lot of things different than Chris Peterson, but also some things that you're like, they're at least in the same universe together, right?
They're similar beliefs, if nothing else. So
exactly. Let's get to some more really good questions today so far.
God Country Notre Dame Barbecue. Should we have any concern that the Notre Dame administration will get in the way of Marcus Freeman getting his guy this time around? I hate to beat a dead horse, but I really don't want to go through that again. Brian, I mean, you talked about that earlier. Like it would be, it's like almost unreasonable to believe. And again, like anything's possible, right? But after what happened last year, if Notre Dame did something similar and it was as bumpy as of a road it was last year, like you can't really come back from that, man. Like that's just a bad look.
They lost money. They had people that didn't give the way that they did before. They were so pissed about that. I mean, Jack Swarbrick had to answer, I was told, thousands of emails and stuff, which is why he did what he did and send out that letter. It's like, okay, I need to send out this letter because I'm getting inundated with people that are pissed about that. And I just don't see it. I don't see it. Because, I mean, again, I've been told it wasn't necessarily that they were not willing to pay that kind of money. They were more pissed about the process. Now, a lot of that process was their own fault. They did too much blaming the agent when they had their own, like, you're doing $1 million deals here. You double, triple check that you got the right contract. Don't go, well, the agent says the wrong contract. Okay, well, you should have made sure you had the right contract beforehand. And you should have double and tripled. Hey, there's no extension. There's nothing new that you sign, anything like that. Nope, we're good, man. So that's still on you. You can't let that happen. It wasn't just that because if they look, guys, if they knew what the number was before the visit started, they never would have brought Andy Ludwig in to interview him in the first place. That's just the reality of it. If they knew it was $2.8 million before, they wouldn't have brought him in. If they were unwilling to pay that, they would not have brought him in. And just the whole process was bungled in a lot of different ways. And I just wish Notre Dame would take more accountability for their role in it, but they weren't the only culprits in this whole thing. So, and then with some of the money people that let them know how how displeased they were, they now know that they have the money to go make this happen. If if Mike Denbrock says, "Hey, I'd love to come, but I got a family to think of, and I'm making $1.5 million, and I'm about to get a 1.8 million, go up to 1.8 million, and my wife likes it here, and you're gonna have to pay the buyout and pay me $2 million a year for me to come." If Marcus Freeman really wants him, he'll get him. If there's a price that Mike Denbrock says this is reason, if there's a reasonable price for Mike Denbrock, and reasonable just meaning like if a coach comes out and says I want $5 million, like, okay, no, we're not high. You're not that. Okay, you're not worth $5 million. I'm sorry. Our head coach makes that. We're not paying an offensive coordinator that. Sorry. But if there's like a reasonable, like, okay, yeah, that's market, that's kind of what you have to pay for an elite coordinator, and he's willing to take that to come here, then I believe that Notre Dame would be willing to pay that. I do. So I don't think money is going to be the reason Notre Dame doesn't get there. Let's get. All right. We got from Rob Osgood. Rob says, question, guys, based upon who you were hearing, what offense does Marcus Freeman really want? I don't think we have seen his true offense identity yet. I think you're correct on that, Rob. I don't think we've seen his true identity yet in some regard. And others we have. I mean, look, Marcus Freeman is going to need to change his identity on offense. He is very much a ball control, limit plays. Yes, he wants to be efficient, have some explosiveness, but protect the football at all costs. And some of that's fine. Some of that stuff there's nothing wrong with some of those approaches. But he also has to understand that protecting the football is one thing, but an obsession over limiting plays, not good. Using your offense only to complement your defense, not good. You've got to be an offense that's more willing to be an aggressive offense, to go on the attack offense, an offense that's willing to do that against the good teams, not just the bad teams. I mean, clearly they were willing to go out and attack teams that weren't good. They just got real conservative sometimes when they were playing teams that weren't very good. And even some of that's not as bad as we make it out to be, because part of the reason, like the Duke game, if you go watch the first series against Duke, Notre Dame was opening it up, throwing the ball downfield, doing different things. And then the offensive line started getting their butts kicked. And I'm just telling you guys, as someone who's had to coordinate plays, and I was never the play caller except for some JV college games, but I was a guy that was a part of the decision-making process in calling plays. It is hard to kind of say, what do we go to here when we're just getting absolutely destroyed up front? There's not a lot on your play sheet for there. You know how coaches have the different sections, 3rd and 5. There's not we're getting our butts kicked up front section. Here's what we call if we're getting our just destroyed up front.
On
right?
either side of the ball either too, man. So,
yeah. I mean, it's just like there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
Well,
I told you the one year I was a defensive coordinator for a freshman team where I was just like, dude, I don't have any answers for you, man. We suck. I can't get anything here. Like, I would love to just be able to run variations of coverages and different blitz looks. I'm just like, dude, I'm just going to play base and do it, dude. Like, I don't know what to tell you at that point. I mean, it's very defeating, but it is a reality that some people have to go through sometimes.
Here's some things I know. So some of those things about what Coach Freeman believes in have to change. But here's a couple things that I know with great confidence that are important to Marcus Freeman. 3 things. Number 1, he truly believes you have to be great in the trenches on both sides of the ball. Number 2, and this is kind of ties in with that one, he does want to have a team that can run the football.
Sure.
Now, do I think he wants to be a team that's just going to be ground and pound and run for 285 yards a game and throw it 9 times a game? No, I don't believe he wants to be that. But he wants to be able to say, no matter who we play, we're going to be able to establish some level of the ability to run the football. Sometimes that only means running for 140, Ryan, but we're doing enough of it to make you have to respect it. And then that's when we open up some other opportunities with the throw game. So, and then the third part is I do believe he values having a mobile quarterback.
Sure.
That's why he liked Tyler Buckner as much as he did. Marcus Freeman loved Tyler Buckner. He just also understood that you couldn't depend on Tyler Buckner because of his injury history. But there was a lot he liked about Tyler Buckner. The only thing he didn't like about Tyler Buckner for the injuries was the turnovers. That was his biggest problem with Tyler, was the turnovers. But he loved what he brought to the table as a playmaker, which is why as soon as Tyler was healthy, that was their quarterback.
Yep.
And so, I mean, it was not even a conversation about, well, he's going to have to beat Drew out, and Drew did some. No, it was like, okay, Tyler's back. Tyler's our quarterback.
There's no bigger headache as a defensive coordinator than a dual threat quarterback that can hurt you with his legs. Like, there's none.
No, there isn't.
Yep. Especially
And
Marcus Freeman that wanted to run so much man coverage. It's like, holy
right.
smokes, dude. You can't do
Yes.
anything with that.
Yes. You just need dudes. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what it boils down to, right? Is you need dudes. Those are the things that I know he wants. Now, the other parts of it, there's going to need to be some adjustments. Just playing
Sure.
ball control, limiting plays. You can't be that, right? You can't. Not at Notre Dame. Some
Yeah.
teams need to do that to Notre Dame because they just don't have the dudes. We got to try to find ways to just move the chains and run the clock. That's fine. But Notre Dame is not going to win championships playing that way.
Right.
Now, you're always going to have the ability to, when you get a lead, do that. Like they did to USC this year, right? When they jumped up on USC 24-16, they completely changed what they were doing offensively because they're like, we are going to try what we can to limit the amount of times that Caleb Williams has the football, which is smart. In that instance, it's smart because that is a quick strike. They can make up that 18-point difference in a hurry.
Yes, they can.
And so you want to limit but they can't do it in a hurry if they only have two. They can't make up 18 points if they only have two possessions. You know what I mean? Like, it's just impossible.
Agreed.
So there are times when that's okay. And that's why it's important to be good up front and be able to run the football and have a dual threat quarterback, because then it's easier for you to kind of, because and you and I have talked about this, Ryan, and we're both big believers in this. You cannot be a great offense at Notre Dame, in my opinion, or just in general, without some ability to change tempos.
Yes.
Whether it's to speed up or to slow down. And this is something that hurt some of the early 2010 spread offenses, that what would hurt them is they'd get in these second half of games and these teams start coming back because they're going away from what they're doing with the aggressiveness, but they don't know how to slow down the tempo. And when they slow down the tempo, their offense becomes useless. And they're 3-and-out, punt, touchdown, 3-and-out, punt, touchdown. Next thing you know, your 24-point second half lead is, if they don't score on this next possession, if you don't score on this next possession, you're going to lose this football game. I mean, you got to be able to do both. And especially at Notre Dame, you've got to have the ability to do both.
Agreed.
Here's an interesting one.
Benjamin Carchi says, who is in your top 10 of Notre Dame players who are in the NFL recent all time? Top 10? We got to do a top 10?
Yeah. I mean, there's some easy ones. Jerome Bettis, Tim Brown, Harrison Smith, Zach Martin. So these are some recents and olds. I grew up with my parents being Redskins fans. So Joe Theismann, and he's got multiple Super Bowl rings. Joe Montana, another great one, right? I'm trying to think of Bob Golick was a really good NFL player. He was at Notre Dame. I'm trying to think of some more in my lifetime that I'm trying to think of. Todd Light had a very good, long, 10-plus year Super Bowl winning NFL career with the Rams, and then a little bit the Lions. Those are 8 that I can think of off the top of my head. I know I'm missing some guys.
Yeah.
I can't say Mark Bavaro because I'm still mad about Super Bowl 22.
He's a pretty good player, man.
I know. I'm still bitter about the butt whooping they put on the Broncos back.
He may have been a Hall of Famer if he didn't start getting banged up in his NFL career, man. He was a great player.
I'm trying to think of some more, Ryan.
Of my
Paul
lifetime,
Hornung before my lifetime. I mean, he won Super Bowls and championships.
Option quarterback at Notre Dame. Mr. Paul Hornung. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, my lifetime, Harrison Smith, Bryant Young when I was young.
Bryant Young, that'd be my 10th.
Fantastic.
I forgot all about Bryant Young. Shoot.
Yeah, those are 2. Tyler Eifert, I mean, he was fantastic. And he was very good in the NFL for the first couple of years before the injuries really started setting in on him. He was really good. I was a Julius Jones fan, man. I love Julius Jones. He was a really good player for Dallas for 1 year. And then his injuries also ensued on him. Zach Martin, Quentin Nelson. I think defensive wise, Julian Love was fantastic yesterday, by the way, had a game clinching interception. I was a big fan of Julian Love. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah has been a really good player for the Cleveland Browns now. Kyle Hamilton is arguably the best safety in the NFL right now. Who would have thought that would happen? I say very, very sarcastically because that was a very easy evaluation. Manti Te'o was a great player. Alohi Gilman has been a really good player for the Chargers now as a safety. Really good, solid player.
I love that kid. He's another one of those
Tuck,
kids
Golden Tate. I mean, there's a lot of guys, man. Top 10 is kind of hard.
Michael Floyd showed such promise. That year 2 he goes for 1,000, and then
Yeah, some off the field stuff and injury stuff, and yeah, it wasn't great.
Yep.
Yep. But really talented player, no doubt.
Yep. I know I'm missing some guys. We'll get off the show. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that offensive lineman. I forgot about that. Tim Grunhard had I think, a great career with the Chiefs. He's another one. Andy Heck had a great career in the NFL with the Seahawks.
I like John Carlson, man. John Carlson ended
Yeah.
up being a really good center in the NFL too.
Yeah. You mean John Sullivan?
What'd I say? I said
John
Carlson.
Carlson.
Oh, John Carlson was also a very
He
good
was a
tight
nice
end
tight
in the NFL.
Yeah, I was agreeing with you, and then you're like center. I was like, hold on a second.
Sullivan. John Sullivan, yeah. I was actually texting with John Sullivan the other day, by the way.
Really?
He apparently trains NFL draft players now.
Awesome.
So there you are.
Very awesome. Yeah, and then Jeff Fain had some, before he got injured, had some nice early years with the Browns. Yeah, he was really good in college, man.
Yeah.
I never paid as much attention to NFL Notre Dame guys once they got the NFL, because unless they came to the Broncos or they played the Broncos.
We had a question from John Flanagan. Thank you, John. Pardon my historical ignorance, but is there some attachment to Notre Dame that would lure Denbrock back? He's got a great gig.
Yeah, he does have a great gig in his opinion. And here's a couple things. Again, he's a Northern guy. I know he has a great amount of respect for Notre Dame and what it stands for and what Notre Dame is all about. He had a lot of success at Notre Dame. And, he's got family up north. Those are all things that are going to be attractive to him. But we also made very clear that it's going to be a hard sell, because I do think he likes where he's at. This isn't a situation where he's begrudgingly working for Brian Kelly, who he hates, and he's going to jump at the first chance to leave. This is not that situation. I mean, Mike Denbrock didn't have to leave Cincinnati. He was in a great situation in Cincinnati. He was not making a ton of money. He got about $1 million pay raise, but, he didn't do that just for the money. Sure. Texas A&M made a run at Mike Denbrock, which is why he's getting the extension he got. He would have easily gone to work for Mike Elko if he hated Brian Kelly and he just was collecting pay. Look, what we have to understand is, does Mike Denbrock agree with everything Brian Kelly does? Probably not. I'm sure he didn't agree with the decisions that went into 2016. I'm pretty confident in that. But these are guys that have legitimately been really good friends for decades. I mean, I think Mike Denbrock was in Brian Kelly's wedding, right? So sometimes you can get past that stuff when it's a genuine friend of yours. There's a great deal of respect there, and he's making a lot of money, and you can recruit there if you work at it, which he's doing. So that's why we don't ultimately think he will take the job, but there are certainly legitimate reasons why I think he'll at least consider it, including his relationship with Marcus Freeman and knowing what Marcus Freeman is capable of and building at Notre Dame.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Another one of my favorites. I just keep thinking about guys now. Drew Tranquil was one of my favorites as well.
Yes. Yeah. I was flipping through channels the other night. Well, not flipping through channels, but on YouTube TV, and stopped in the Chiefs game for like a couple minutes and saw Drew come up with a sack. Yeah, I was like, okay, I've seen it.
And he's wearing 23 again, man, with the Chiefs now, which is dope.
I do like that. I'm in a lot of ways I'm a traditionalist, Ryan. But a couple things I never understood about the NFL is like why they forced those certain numbers on like receivers and stuff. Like I was like that's a rule that should have been brought on a long time ago. I do like that. I do like that. I'm not someone I need to see linebackers. It was good enough for Dick Butkus. No, screw that. Like who cares? It's a number, right? I like it, and that is one of the newer things they've done that I really like. Seeing those guys in there, like watching Jackson Smith and Jigba catch a ball with number 11. I don't see him wearing number 81. You know what I mean? Like,
well, the Chiefs is a lot of fun because Drew Tranquil wears his college 23, and then Nick Bolton wears his college 32. I'm like, that's dope. It's absolutely
there. You
go. USMA 87. Do you think the offensive coordinator shuffle will change Riley Leonard's commitment?
From what I was told last night, no. But until the paperwork is official, I'm going to have some of the same concerns you guys do. Be honest with you.
Sure.
I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't at all concerned. I'll just tell you what I've been told is they're comfortable with the answers they've gotten from the transfers, and that there's buy-in to, hey, we trust Coach Freeman to go, the vision is not the goals have not changed because Jared Parker's left. Marcus Freeman's goals for next season don't change because Jared Parker left. If they're not changing because Joe Alt left, they're not going to change because Jared Parker left. And that's ultimately what they're buying into.
Good to hear. Very good to hear. 5 Burkhart boys. Mailbag. Can you see a clear path after the practice for CJ Carr to be number 2 next season?
And that's jumping way ahead. Like, he looked
Yep.
really good throwing the football. His path to being number 2 next year has not changed. He's going to have an opportunity if he develops quickly enough because he's very talented, but it's going to be a challenge because Kenny Minchie's also really good, and Steve Angeli's not going to just hand that job over to somebody else.
Yep.
So the path is still going to be a challenge because he's not the only really talented quarterback in the room. But it was more of it was nice to see and confirm what the tape told me.
Sure.
That's more of what it was, as opposed to, gee, I didn't know if this guy was going to be any good, but then I see him live and he's really good. It wasn't that. It was he's exactly what I hoped he would be. But he's still going to have to battle Kenny Minchie because Kenny Minchie is also spins the ball like I thought he would. And so it's going to be a battle. It is.
You might need to get a new number too at some point, but we'll have a conversation about that another
Which
time.
one, Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr?
CJ. No, number 8's a very good quarterback number. Number 17, Philip Rivers. I mean, it's okay.
Right.
Steve
It's my
DeBerg.
baseball number my last 2 years, Ryan, because I wore my first football number ever was number 1, and then obviously number 7 was my favorite number, and so I didn't like for whatever reason I don't like single digits in baseball jerseys. I don't know why it is. I just maybe because all my 30 and 24 and 11, 13, all my favorite player numbers. I just baseball jerseys for whatever reason I don't like single digits, although I love them for football because I played quarterback. So I went 17. So yeah, I mean, so I have affinity for that. But it did.
17 is a good baseball number. I mean, you got Todd Helton and Ohtani, and there's some good 17s in baseball.
It just looked weird on him. This was kind of expecting to see 13, but you understand why he's not wearing 13.
Sure, sure, yeah. That's in a different locker waiting for someone else. So
just felt a little weird. Felt a little weird.
Maybe he'll get it in year 2. Who knows?
Yeah.
Coach Koch, what do you think of the what do you think the quarterbacks look like for the next few seasons? Riley Leonard, then CJ for 4 years, or is it Minchie and then CJ? Best guess.
I mean, I don't have one, honestly. I mean, I'm not trying to take a cop out, but I need to see both of these guys develop over the next year. I really don't. I could see it being Kenny for 3 and CJ gets passed over by Deuce. I could be being CJ for 3 or 4, and then he leaves and it's Deuce. I could see it being Kenny, then CJ, then Deuce. I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios in which I could see. Ryan,
it never works out the way you think it's going to work out either, right? So it never does. So I mean, it's a fun question, but yeah.
Oh, it's a great question, Coach. I have no problem with the question. I'm just trying to be honest. Like, I don't really have a guess because I grade CJ Carr out higher than Kenny Minchie. I had Kenny Minchie as a top 100 quarterback, a top 100 player as a quarterback. I think Kenny Minchie has a lot of talent. Yep. So, and he's always going to be a year ahead of CJ. And one of the things that we had heard, I know Malik Zaires talked about this from working with Kenny one-on-one at the Elite 11. I know Trent Dilfer has talked about this. Some other people at the Elite, like he was by far the sharpest mentally kid at the Elite 11. Talking about Kenny Minchie. Like his ability to absorb information is like really good. And you hear Notre Dame coaches talking about that. Like, for his age, he can absorb that stuff really well. And so he's going to have that. So CJ's going to have to beat him out if he's going to be that guy. Is he capable of it? Sure. But is Kenny capable of beating out CJ? Of course. They're both very talented kids. And I love the fact that, like CJ never backed off knowing Kenny was here, but Kenny committed after CJ. So Kenny wasn't afraid of the competition either. And that's what gives me more. And then Deuce is committing with both of them on the roster. Because if I want to win it, be a champion, go to a great program, I have to battle with somebody.
Right.
And so you just love that competitive spirit. None of those kids were scared off by another guy being really talented. Kenny Minchie wasn't scared off by CJ Carr. CJ Carr wasn't scared off by Kenny Minchie or Deuce Knight. Deuce Knight wasn't scared off by Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr. That's the kind of mindset you need. I'm going to go battle. I'm going to go battle because I believe in myself and I believe in my ability. And they've got 3 kids like that. Well, and Steve Angeli thinks he's way better than he is, which is exactly the attitude he needs to have if he's ever going to be the long-term starting quarterback at Notre Dame, right? So they all have there's a lot of confidence in that room, and not arrogant, false bravado. Just I believe I can play, and so I'm not afraid of competition, and you got to like that. You got to like that, Ryan.
Absolutely,
I do anyway.
Yep. Isaac Evans, what new or in Industrialized? Is it what's it?
Underutilized is what that's meant.
Underutilized. Okay. I was like, what the heck did I say? Okay.
Yeah.
What new or underutilized, the I in the beginning there threw me off a little bit, personnel groups, concepts would you like to see emphasized by the new offensive coordinator?
Well, I think we've talked about a little bit of it, Ryan, more two-back stuff.
Yeah.
I'd also be more willing, especially early in the year when your tight end numbers are a little thinner. There's some 20 stuff I wouldn't mind seeing, right?
Sure.
With Jabron Payne, because like I could see Jabron Payne doing a lot of the stuff that Devin Ford did this year.
Mhm.
You know, where he because Jabron can catch the ball in the backfield, but
Sure.
he can be your kind of lead, your guy that runs the ball with Jeremiah or Jadarian outside. He can lead block in some certain looks. Like that's a formation I would like to see at times.
Yeah.
It's not like a staple. It's not something you do 20 times a game, but it's like, you know, some things that you can do to kind of come out as a wrinkle to throw off certain teams, especially 4-2-5 teams. I love 20 personnel against 4-2-5 teams. If you have a second back that can give you some level of get a body on somebody in the run game, right?
Sure.
Like, because there's just some box things that you can do if you have that in a mobile quarterback. Because, like, think about it, Ryan. If you're in a 4-2-5 and we're spread with three receivers, and I have whether it's an H back or a second running back that can lead block, that can catch the ball, and I've got a mobile quarterback, you're in a little bit of a bind. You're going to have to either bring your rover in and walk a safety down or double rob. There's just certain things you need to do to get numbers back in your favor that those looks can give you. I mean, you can get them out of 11 personnel also, but the 20 personnel gives you some different run game options where both of those guys are threats to run the ball.
Sure.
Whereas in 11 personnel, they're both threats to catch the ball. So it's just a wrinkle that kind of gives you some different stuff that you can do play action wise and run game wise and screen game wise that I'd like to see them use at times against certain teams.
Yeah.
But that's really the big thing for me. Concepts wise, it's more so about, it's not so much concepts, right? There's a ton of good concepts. It's exactly what you talked about earlier. The offensive coordinator of Notre Dame needs to start doing a much better job of doing more things in the pass game to create favorable matchups and matchups, isolation. So like an example of something we saw against Pitt that we didn't see enough of this year that I want to continue to see more of. It wasn't Pitt, excuse me, it was Wake Forest. They lined up with Jordan Faison backside, Jaden Greathouse in the slot, and they ran a post over concept with a play action look. And it's not super complicated, but because of who they put in the boundary and who they put in the slot, it put the defense in a bind because you had that speed to take the coverage off. If the safety comes down and you know, it's a true quarters and not a single high, you can bang that outside post easily, Ryan. But the way they did it is they rolled to the middle, brought that safety down because of the play action, and Jaden Greathouse, they cleared out the corner and the safety. Jaden Greathouse comes wide open the deep over. Like, that's not a super complicated scheme. But if you can run the football, that's not an easy scheme to defend either if you have speed into the boundary. And so that was a play that was designed to get a high ISO, right? There was one of these two things is going to come open. And just more stuff like that. I mean, that's something that Sarkisian in 2020 was masterful of. He could find – you're like, okay, I know Devontae Smith is a good route runner, but he's not that good where he's 15 yards wide open all the time. It's because it was his speed, his route running with just great scheme that was designed. All these other guys are kind of in some ways screeners in some ways, right? Like it's almost like a basketball type of concept where all these guys are working to set screens to get one guy open on the baseline. You know what I mean? You're like, how can that guy get that one? Because he just kept running. Like they had this play and he's running around circles and they just kept setting these screens and then, you know, guy gets open. And I just want to see more stuff like that. And that was the encouraging thing in not the Clemson game, but the Pitt, Wake, Stanford game is we were seeing a lot more receivers just running open because of some of the scheme stuff they were doing, which we didn't see enough of that before. What they were doing before required receivers to win one-on-one all the time. And that's fine if you've got dudes, but even with dudes, there's still got to be stuff where you're scheming them to help them out, get them open and create issues and ISOs and matchups. And that's more of a philosophical thing than a concept. There's a lot of different concepts you can use to make that happen, Ryan. as long as you have the philosophy of we're going to make this happen. And to what you said, that's something we see from Kirby Moore on film is a desire, and it's not just Luther Burden all the time. We see it with Theo Weiss, we see it with their running backs. And there's a couple times I saw them do things to kind of get their tight end open. And they're like, just to kind of catch a team, do it once, but they catch a team and steal 25 yards. I like stuff like that. That's more of what I want.
Yep. RPO, play action, screens, perimeter runs. I just want to create a little bit more space and let these guys work, man, ultimately. So nothing super complicated, nothing even scheme related as much. It's just more, I feel like Notre Dame was limited at times over the last couple of years to attacking just one part of the field. I want to open up the ability to attack the field.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Tarnowski, what would the estimated money difference be between Mike Denbrock and Kirby Moore if you had to guess? How much will that play into the decision?
Well, I don't know that it's going to necessarily have a huge factor in it, other than just one guy may be less prone to come because he's making so much more money. And so basically Kirby Moore, from what I understand, is making about 8 to 850, 750 to 850. I've heard different numbers.
Okay.
Mike Denbrock's making almost $1.5 million. So the buyout for neither is huge, but in order to get you could pay Kirby Moore what Mike Denbrock's making now, and that's a huge pay increase for him.
Sure.
To get Mike Denbrock a similar, you've got to pay him even more. So that's more so just is one guy, like let's say they're both interested and you like them both equally. You're going to take the guy that makes less money if all things are equal, right? Yep. But if they view Mike Denbrock as the significantly better guy and he wants to come, they'll make it work. But it just because if they go with Kirby Moore, and this is hypothetical, and they pay him less than they would have paid Denbrock, it doesn't mean that they made the hire just because he's cheaper.
Yeah.
Right. Because I've heard, I'll just leave it at that. I don't think money is going to be a hindrance this year. Now, unless it's someone just asking for something ridiculous. Like, yeah, I could pay that, but I'm not gonna. Like I've talked to say, I'll come work for you, man. All right, cool. How much you want to make?
It's like the Cameron Ward negotiations right now, where it's like, I don't know if that's worth it. I don't know.
I could pay you that. I certainly have the ability to pay you that, but I'm not gonna because you're not worth that.
Right.
So where I could get this other guy who's every bit as good as you and pay him a third of that.
Sure.
Makes total sense. I mean, that's like when people buy out businesses, right? A lot of times the first thing they do is get rid of all the people making the most money. So I can hire 2 23-year-olds to do what you do for $50,000 less combined than what I'm paying you, one person. And that's that's the trim and the fat that you'll see people do.
Economics, man. Economics. Right. All right, we got Andre Tonsils as talented players plus great coaching. What? Thoughts?
Yeah, equals what?
Equals what? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
It's a championship.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's ultimately what, if you have talented players and great coaching, you're going to win a championship. I mean, or you're at least going to have an opportunity to win a championship. And the only way you won't is if you lose to someone who has a little bit more talent, a little bit better coaching, which can happen.
Wider margin for error, Andre.
Yeah.
Wider margin for error.
Oh, yeah. And what it does, Ryan, and this goes to Ryan's point of the margin for error, is it puts you on that stage more often. And the more often you're on that stage, the greater chance you win one year. That's what it boils down to, right? And yeah, that's how I see it. That's how I see it.
Yep. Michael says, Brian and Ryan, Mike Brown has a connection with Mike Denbrock from his time at Cincinnati. Yes,
he does.
With him.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Michael, good to see you, man. Hope you're doing well, buddy. Yes, they coached together from 19, 20, and 21. So for
Marcus
3 years,
also coached with Mike Denbrock. So
in 19 and 20, correct. Yeah. Well, actually, Marcus Freeman was with Mike Denbrock longer than. Yeah, they were together from 17 to 20.
Yeah.
So they were together 4 years, and then Freeman left after 20, and Denbrock stayed for 1 more year, and Mike Brown was there from 19, 20, and 21. Yeah.
Yep.
So
there's a connection there. There's a connection.
Definitely. Don't think that's going to necessarily sway the decision, but it doesn't hurt. You're going to a
Yes.
place where you want to know I'm going there and I'm going to have good coaches around me.
Yep.
That's a positive.
Also, I mean, Mike Denbrock's offenses were battling out with Marcus Freeman's defenses every day. So I would imagine they have somewhat of a solid relationship. I could be wrong about that, but I would imagine.
There's a respect. I know this for a fact. There's a very, very much a mutual respect between the two. Now, it may not be enough to where Denbrock's Freeman's number one choice. It may be not be to the point where Denbrock's willing to leave LSU to go there. There's a lot of guys I have mutual respect for, but I'm not going to work for them, and they're not going to come work for me. It doesn't make sense professionally.
Yeah.
But there's a very high level of respect there between the two. Doesn't mean that it's ever going to mean they're going to coach together again, but there's definitely a respect there for sure. But as I also said, I think Mike Denbrock also respects Brian Kelly, which is why he's now worked with Brian Kelly at 3 different places: Grand Valley State, Notre Dame, and LSU.
Yep. Savage saying fitness. My front runner is Brian Hartline for offensive coordinator, but I know that's probably a dream. I mean, look, someone said this on Twitter yesterday to me about Brian Hartline, and there would have been maybe another scenario or in the past where I would have at least thought about Brian Hartline, especially when there was a wide receiver coach position opened. But it doesn't make any sense for Notre Dame right now. He has never called an offense. He's never called an offense, and you have a new wide receiver coach. I don't get the appeal for Brian Hartline today for Notre Dame. Maybe there was another pass, maybe there was another reality, but right now, I don't think that would even make any logical sense to me.
I also just don't get the obsession over Brian Hartline. I think he's a very good receivers coach.
Yeah, it's great.
And he's clearly a good recruiter, a great recruiter.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that you're going to be a great coordinator. I mean, and all I know is his first year as the coordinator, and he wasn't the play caller. That was Ryan Day. Their offense took a huge step back because they didn't have C.J. Stroud. It's not arguably the best receiving core in college football. Very talented running backs, great defense. Their offense took a huge step back this year because they didn't have a Hall of Fame, not Hall of Fame, but like a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback.
Yep.
I'm not blaming Brian Hartline for that, but you can't ignore that. If that was happening at Notre Dame, we'd be like, no, you can't promote that guy. This guy was co-OC or whatever this year, and he didn't do a good job. You can't promote him. So no, I don't. I just don't get that one. I mean,
and also I know Ryan Day's like very egotistical, which is part of the conversation, but like there was a scenario before the season where it was like Brian Hartline becomes the play caller, and Ryan Day didn't trust him enough at that point to make him the de facto play caller too. So it just doesn't make sense where Notre Dame is. For some other colleges, it might make a lot of sense. For where Notre Dame is, I don't think it makes any logical sense.
Agree.
All right, we had a question from that one guy, 15. Thank you for the question. Curious, and no one will likely ever know. What? That one guy? 15?
So I didn't look at the name as I pulled it up. So you just said that one guy, and I was like, seriously, dude? Oh, that's his name.
That's his name.
It's like wow.
Trash. That one guy. Trash, yeah. Curious, and no one will likely ever know, but if CJ Carr reclassified last year, do they go into the portal for next year?
I mean, you kind of answered your own question. Who can know?
Right.
I would say probably still, I don't know. I mean, if he reclassified, maybe not.
Well, you probably still need to find depth, right, to the roster. Like maybe
I'm
not a
looking
guy.
At it like, would you have gone for Riley Leonard? I don't know because you'd basically have CJ. Here's the thing: you'd have CJ would have replaced Kenny Minchie. You wouldn't have if CJ reclassifies. You don't also sign Kenny Minchie. So who would your 24 quarterback be? Would it be somebody like CJ that would make you feel better, or would it be CJ and Jelly and then that's it? Because now you would definitely need to go to the portal. Would CJ be ready for 2024? I don't know. I mean, he's still skinny. He's still going to need some time in the weight room. I don't know.
Who knows?
Let's say this. I think we can all agree that if he reclassified, you would hope, just like next year. Now that he's here, I hope we're done with Notre Dame going to the portal for starters. I hope we're done with that.
You have to be done.
They're going to have to go to the portal frequently to fill out the depth chart.
Sure.
But I hope they're done with portal starters. And CJ and Kenny are going to have a big role in that over these next couple of years. So that's best I can say is I would hope so.
Yep. Coach Koch, all the guys declared, who gets drafted, who goes UDFA, and could there be an Ian Book level surprise?
So what I'm going to do here, Ryan, is I'm just going to go
Yep.
through the list guys and then have you tell me right
Round
now.
range. Yeah.
And now a lot can change, right?
Sure.
Combine, medicals, pro
All-Star
day,
games. Yep.
injuries, all-star games, sometimes
Yes.
injuries to other players, not the Notre Dame guys, but other players that can write,
Sure. Yep.
Ronnie Stanley's probably the number 2 drafted offensive lineman in the 2017 draft, if not for, it would be 2016 draft, if not for Laramie Tunsil's indiscretions.
Yes.
So those things can, but you're not going from 39 to 6. Right. So there's always some things that could change, but with what we know now,
unless you're Titus Howard with the Houston Texans, where they were just like, man, we need an offensive lineman, and they all got drafted. Let's pull them up here.
That was so bad. And that's why that coach got fired. One of the many reasons that coach got fired. So let's just go. I'm gonna go kind of position by position, Ryan, and we'll just kind of rapid fire this one. Sam Hartman.
Started with the hardest one. 7th round.
Okay. Aldrich Estime.
3rd round, early 3rd.
Okay. Trying to go. Is there any receivers? No receivers. No tight ends. Let's go. Joe Alt.
Top 5.
Okay.
First offensive tackle off the board. There's the.
I like that one. That one. Blake Fisher.
He'll go in the late 3rd, early 4th round, just off of traits.
Okay. Unless he blows the interview and draft process.
Yeah.
Javante Jean-Baptiste.
6th round.
Maris Leofau.
5th round.
JD Bertrand.
7th to PFA.
Okay. DJ Brown. Sorry.
UDFA.
Okay. Yeah. And then Cam Hart.
Cam goes to 3rd rounds.
And then here's the last one. Spencer Schrader.
He'll be a priority free agent. Someone will definitely bring him into camp. I don't think he gets drafted. And he got a Hula Bowl invite. He didn't get invited to either one of the 2 big All-Star games, and that's usually a pretty big tell for special.
Great leg, not accurate, and that's going to project even worse if you were talking about smaller goalposts to kick through. Here's the other one that I have. Another guy that I think is going to be an undrafted free agent unless he just gets a huge offer to just go into the business world or something out of college, which could happen. Yeah. Michael Vincent. Somebody's going to give him a shot.
Yeah, Michael Vincent will get a shot, I think, because he's a relatively good-sized kid, too. He's like 6'2", 230 something. Like, he's not a smaller dude. I think he'll be in a camp, at least. Yep.
Very consistent, steady snapper.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Andy Milton fan. Julian Love was Monday Night Football. Hashtag BK hates kittens and double dips.
Okay, then. Not one of your best efforts, my man.
Heard better. Michael S. Does the quality of hire of strength and conditioning coach encourage or discourage your confidence in Marcus Freeman's hiring of quality offensive coordinators?
I don't know enough about him to have an opinion either way, number one. And number two, there are 2 completely different types of hires. Look, strength conditioning coach is incredibly important. I've argued this many times. It's the most important hire a head coach can make. However, the process of hiring a strength coach and the type of people you'll consider is way different. For example, you will see someone hire a guy who was not really a team strength coach before that does personal workouts, kind of like what the Denver Broncos did with Coach Landau, right? Mm-hmm. You'll never see someone go hire some guy that's never coached before, but just like Notre Dame will never hire their OC to be some guy who's never coached before, but coaches quarterbacks.
Yep.
Completely different world from position coaches. And so it's just a different universe. And I honestly, Michael, I will be honest with you about things I do and don't know. And I don't know enough about the inner workings of strength conditioning. And I haven't coached football at a real college since 2005. Right. And so strength conditioning has changed so much, even since the last job I had in 2013, which was at a really not a great place. Even in that 10 years, Ryan, strength conditioning has changed a ton. And so I don't know enough about it to be able to say this guy could tell me exactly what he believes, and I wouldn't know if it was better or worse. I have no clue. I just know what the end result needs to be. I know the culture it needs to build. I don't need to necessarily know the ins and outs of all that. If I was coaching, I would be doing more of studying of this. Like if I was a head coach, I would be learning about this. It'd be something that would be required of me, in my opinion, as a head coach to know this. But I'm not a head coach. I'm not coaching anymore. So I don't need to study the latest ins and outs of strength conditioning. I just know, however you get there, this is what the end result needs to be. Right.
Sure.
And so it's just such a different animal. But I don't know enough about Coach Landau to be able to tell you if it was a good or a bad hire. It was a risky hire. I know that. But look, here's what I know. A guy that played at Notre Dame, played in the NFL, won a Super Bowl in the NFL, whose opinion I value greatly, Ryan Harris, loves the guy and thinks it's a great hire. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to believe it's a great hire because I still don't know. But that means something to me. Brady Quinn advocating for him doesn't mean a whole lot to me because as much as I love Brady Quinn, because Brady Quinn also was like, Chancey Stuckey was a great guy and I hate to see him go. And there's a disconnect there. The difference is Brady, there's some like professional relationship here with this guy. But to me, the reason Ryan Harris means more to me is because I don't know if Brady worked out with this guy. I know that Ryan Harris paid his money to have this guy train him.
Yeah.
That means something to me. He put his career in this guy's hands when it came to strength conditioning and training. That tells me, that means something to me because I respect the heck out of Ryan Harris's opinion on things like that. When Ryan Harris has an opinion on an offensive line coach, I'm going to listen to it. I may not come to the same conclusion, but it's going to be data that I am willing to absorb. There's other things about it that are concerning, but I don't know enough about that stuff to be able to say for sure, yep, that's bad. So end of the day, Ryan, it's a long way of saying I have no idea if it was a good or a bad hire because it's just not my area of expertise. There's some things about it that encourage me, some things that I'm concerned about. At the end of the day, the proof will be in the pudding, and then we'll find out. But the process, the one thing I will say, that has nothing to do with my confidence in the OC or hire because I know it's just two completely different processes and type of pools of people you'll be pulling from for the two hires.
Well, I mean that, and also nobody's perfect in hires, right? So everyone makes bad hires, everyone makes great hires. I mean, Marcus Freeman made a great hire in Dylan McCullough. He made a really good hire in Al Golden. He's made some really good hires, but he didn't make the best hire.
Right.
Yeah, but he didn't make the best hire in Chancey Stuckey. So ultimately, you have some great, you have some good, you have some poor at the end of the day, right? So there's a possibility that he hires a great strength and conditioning coach and he strikes out an offensive coordinator or vice versa, or they're both great or they're both not great. I mean, those realities all exist. I'm not going to rush to judgment based upon one versus the other.
Yep.
Question and a super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. How do you think Jared Parker will do at Troy?
I don't know.
Troy's in a good spot. I mean, I know they're losing a lot off of this year's team. Their running back Gunnar Watson's going to be gone. Their two pass rushers, Javon Solomon and Richard Jibinor, is also going to be gone, who are both going to play in the NFL. I think their running back potentially is coming back, the Vidal kid, who's a good player, but they're going to be losing a lot off this year's team. There's no doubt about that. So it'd have to reload, but Troy's in a good spot as far as like the previous regime left them in a very good situation. So hopefully it's going to be a smoother transition, but I have no idea how good of a head coach Jared Parker is. I'm still trying to figure out how good of an offensive coordinator he is. I still didn't know that ultimately. Right. So We'll see. I think he landed in a pretty good spot though. I mean, Troy's been a relatively consistent program and they were coming off this very successful years, obviously. So we'll see.
Absolutely. I think he's a pretty organized guy too. And some of the things he believes in about toughness and things like that, I think fit well as a head coach. But yeah, we'll see. I hope he does well.
He's a likable person too.
Yeah.
Players all like him, so I'm sure he'll be a guy that is attractive to recruits and that type of thing too. I'm sure.
Yep.
Right. We had one from Roger Dodger, our resident USC fan. Do you think Notre Dame's budget for an offensive coordinator is more or less than $2.5 million a year?
Well, there's a lot that goes into that, Ryan. I mean, $2.5 million a year just for the salary. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, I'm trying to even think of what the highest paid. I'm going to look this up. High paid offensive coordinators in college football. I mean, I don't even know what the top coordinators are making. I mean, I imagine it's like looks like Garrett Riley is the highest paid at 2.05. It looks
That was
like.
going to be my guess. That was going to be my
Yeah.
guess too.
And
Since the most
Ryan
recent.
Grubb's at 2. Jim Knowles is a D coordinator, 1.96. I mean, that you'd be setting the market by a lot.
Yeah.
Now, if you were to say the budget is 2.5, including the buyout, that would be much more in line with it. Yes.
Sure.
But here's the other thing too, is if you have a guy that you believe can bring you a championship, you go to your AD, you say, listen, we need a couple, $3-4 more $100,000 from what, or $500,000 from what our budget is. If you have a good AD, the AD gets on the phone and says, hey, I need you to talk to this booster, this booster, this booster. Let's make this happen. Let's get what we need. And you do it. And that's, I know if anyone at Notre Dame is listening, if you're $500,000 short or $1 million short for the coach you want to get, call me, because I have some people that I get you in touch with that I will gladly pay whatever you need for that buyout or whatever you need for the salary. Just give me a call. We'll hook it up and you'll be fine. They know who those people are. That's sarcasm.
They sure do.
But I could see the total cost being around there potentially, but I think it's going to be more in line with you're going to pay a guy, you're going to have a $500,000 buyout, and what you're going to pay the guy, you're getting closer to 2 would most likely be, I think, where they are, as opposed to that. If you're going to get Denbrock, it'd probably be over 2, including the buyout. But because he's making 1.4 right now, so I mean, you'd have to pay him like 1.8, 1.9, 2 million somewhere around. I mean, so you're going to have to get him in the top highest paid coaches, and then a $500,000 buyout. You probably get there, including the buyout. But you're not going to reset the market by $500,000 to get Mike Denbrock. I don't think. Now he may ask for that, and that's good for him. You know what I mean? But
yeah, and he should. That's called negotiation. So I would.
What I mean, ask for it is like, if you don't do this, I'm not coming. Okay, fine. Sure. That's all good. I mean, because if you like where you're at, this is the thing, Ryan. If you like where you're at, then you have all the bargaining power. Right. Well, we're not going to pay you that. All right, cool. Best of luck to you next year. Hope we see you in the playoff. I mean, that's the conversation. Like, well, why are you asking for so much? Because I like where I'm at. I don't need this job. Right. I like where I'm at. And so you can ask for more. And if they really want you, they'll pay it. And if they don't, you're happy where you are. Where you got to be careful is if you actually want the job and you don't want to stay where you are, you kind of have to be careful with how much you're willing to go for and you're, and those type of things. But if you like where you're at, and from everything I've ever been told, Mike Denbrock loves it at LSU.
Yeah.
If you want to get that guy, you're going to have to pay him a little bit more. Okay, you're making 1.4. Let's pay you 1.6. Sorry, buddy. You're not even in the same universe for right now for what it would cost for me to come take that job, So I think 2.5 could be where it would be total cost, including the buyout. I could see it getting up to around there.
He's a big Gumbo fan down in the Bayou.
Yeah.
Big Gumbo fan.
Yep.
Big Gumbo guy. Andre Tonso, who's your gap closer in the 2023 recruiting class?
I think he means 24 because 2023 are guys that are already on campus.
Sure.
So I'm assuming he means, let's just 23. I mean, we've talked about Jeremiah Love. I think Jaden Greathouse, the guys who's on the roster, Jeremiah Love, Jaden Greathouse, Kenny Minchie, Charles Jagasaw. Yeah. Boubacar Traore from an upside standpoint, just your D-line class as a whole. Drake Bowen, Jaden Osbury for sure. Christian Gray, absolutely. Those are guys that off the top of my head are gap closers. Right.
Yeah. I would agree there. Are we going 2024 then, or is sticking 20?
Yeah, I'll let you. I was going to let you kind of do that one since I went the 23 one.
CJ Carr is a gap closer potentially. I think the running backs lengthen the gap that you were creating, or at least strengthen their ability to be the gap potentially. So I think they're just gap wideners, I guess, if that's where you were going to kind of coin it. Cam Williams is a gap closer. I think that Mikey Gilbert's a gap. I think the whole wide receiver class is a gap closing class potentially. I truly do believe that. Offensive line, like again, you've already made the gap. I think that Garrett B. Lambert continues to help extend that gap. He would be a gap closer for me. I think Logan Thomas is a gap closer. I think Bryce Young is a gap closer for me personally.
Would you say the edge class as a whole is a gap?
I wouldn't put Cole Mullins in that.
No, I mean, like as a group, the position group is closing the gap.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. That's fair. We could do that. Kingston is a gap.
I was just using what you said about the receiving core.
Sure.
As an example.
Yeah. Kingston is a gap closer. I think I don't know if I would necessarily say there's. I mean, again, like cornerback, you've kind of closed the gap a little bit, right? I just
Yeah,
think that Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs just continue that
yes,
lineage,
agree.
and then I think Bronte Johnson, from a talent perspective, is a gap closer if he
Yeah,
hits.
agree with that. And I would say that last year's safety class is a gap closer in the other sense of gap closing, which is it was a concern, it was a major concern of yours, and you've upgraded it. So like even the there's like I said, there's different like what the first list Ryan and I gave, that's just guys that are just wow, that's a really high level talent, and it
Yep.
closes the gap in that regard. But then the other side is the guys that maybe aren't traditional gap closers, but it was such a position of need that you made yourself better, which also closes the gap. And I think a Don Schuler is that kind of player, where he's not a traditional gap closer in that he's an elite top 50 talent, but you needed a guy like him, high floor,
Sure.
smart, good football player to help solve a position that's been kind of a problem,
Yep.
from a depth and need standpoint. So there's other guys like that, but just a pure that guy's a talent alone, no matter what else the context is closing the gap. I think that list is one that I would agree with. Right? Like, there's always the upside guys. Maybe Bodie Cahoon can tap into his potential, but he's not that guy right now. I mean, I don't think, and so I agree with your list. I like your list,
Thank you.
and tight end has been good the last 2 years, but I don't consider those guys like holy moly, the needle has been moved. And there's really
Right.
not much of a needle to move, to your point.
Sure. You had Lloyd Christmas. Should we be moving Jeremiah Love around more like a Christian McCaffrey?
Yes.
I mean, to a degree, yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that this is a much easier question, Lloyd, than like seems to be some people out there. It's like, should they just move him the wide receiver? And it's like, no, they shouldn't move him the wide receiver. Should they move him around the formation though, to maximize matchups? Absolutely. Like, yes, they should be motioning him into different spots. They should be running jets with them at times. They should be using him in the screen game. They should be using him in a lot of different capacities. I would 100% agree with that. Yes.
Yep.
We had a super chat from Bobby Jesus Follower Reeves. Thank you, Bobby. Why was Ian Book successful at Notre Dame but not in the NFL? I don't want to be mean here. I don't want to be mean here.
I'll try my best to
Yeah.
He just wasn't. Ian Book actually had, number one, he was small. He's very small. And while a good athlete in college, I don't know that he's necessarily the dynamic athlete like a Jalen Hurts is to be able to get away with that.
Sure.
Ian actually has a much better arm than people give him credit for, but it's not a bazooka.
Yeah,
And a guy that's going to have his arm talent has to have the mind. He has to have a great mind for the game, meaning like the timing, the anticipation, the reading defenses. And Ian Book was just never a great processor. And, look, he was a really good leader at Notre Dame. He was a tough kid, but he played on some really talented teams against some really bad schedules. Reality is Ian Book in 3 years went 5-5 against top 25 teams. That's their record, So, I mean, that's just not. Tony Rice had 12 wins over top 25 teams in 2 years as a starter, right? So, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Ian, but that's why I've always said the hype around him was greater than the actual product that he put on the field.
Sure.
But he was a leader. He was a tough kid, and I'll give him credit. He was a kid that when the game was on the line, stepped up. Now, he was struggling like the big games. He just couldn't make plays against Clemson, right? In the 2018 Clemson team. The ACC title game, he just wasn't there. But in the games that were competitive, in the fourth quarter, with the game on the line, you felt Ian was going to go make a play because that's one thing he did prove. Clemson 2020, Virginia Tech 2019, Pitt 2018. Whenever it was a close game and Ian had a chance in the fourth quarter to do something, that's the thing I'll always remember about him. He showed up in those moments. It just was too often in those big games. He just was overwhelmed from jump and wasn't willing to make those throws. And if you're not doing those things against Clemson in the college football playoff, you're darn sure not doing them in the National Football League when the windows are a whole lot smaller.
Yep. I honestly, and again, I'm not going to harp on the Ian Book thing, but he was always overdrafted. I mean, he went in the fourth round. He just should not have been drafted that high, if at all, to be honest with you. And I think that there is preconceived notions that scouts have sometimes about players because they hear it, right? They talk to coaches at Notre Dame. They talk to DPPs. They talk to a bunch of different people that are behind the scenes. And I'm sure that there were nothing but rave reviews about Ian Book. Great kid, hard worker, leader, awesome. Multi-year starter, won a lot of football games. Cool. And that, I think, alters what you see on film to a degree, or at least it changes the intangible aspect of the conversation as well. So people buy into, wow, that coaching staff said that kid is a great leader and he's a really hard worker, and you buy it, you take a leap of faith on that alone sometimes, and you kind of, I don't want to say you don't. Again, I'm trying to be nice. You forgive some
If
things.
he wasn't at Notre
shortcomings.
Dame, he gets nowhere near the 4th round. I'll
No.
just leave it at that.
Yes.
And I forgot, my man, I don't want to get in trouble with my guy James. Luke Talich, gap closer, baby. I don't want to Luke, no, but just little fun in the chat. But yeah, Ryan, I feel bad doing this because I think he was a great kid and the players respected him and all that. But it got to the point where there was just so much hyperbole about him and the way that the Notre Dame media team just hypes up quarterbacks anyway.
Yeah.
They're like, they won games at times in spite of him. That's just a fact. I mean, like, oh, what a great 4th quarter comeback against Virginia Tech and Pitt. You were only in that situation because of how bad he was the first 3 quarters of that game, right? Like, he threw 2 red zone interceptions against Virginia Tech. That's why you were even in a close game against Quincy Patterson. You know what I mean? Like, so
who's at Temple now, apparently, as a backup quarterback.
As a backup quarterback, exactly. So yeah, great kid, just not the quarterback people made him out to be. And as you said, Ryan, way overdrafted. And is he still in the NFL?
I know last year he was on the practice squad for the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't know if he's on the practice squad still or
I'm
not.
going to look up real quick. It looks like he is the Patriots, maybe? Looks like is
what?
But yeah, he got drafted in the 2021 draft in the 4th round, and he's already been on 3 teams.
Yes. And I think everyone saw his lone start that year for the Saints against the Dolphins, which was not
was just great. Overwhelmed. I mean, again, it's a great kid, but he just doesn't have that. And I mean, I'm not trying to be, I don't dislike Ian Book at all, but that's just the reality of who he is. I'm looking here at the practice squad. He is no longer on the practice squad for the Patriots. Their practice squad quarterback is now Will Grier. So I do not believe he's on an NFL roster. Yeah.
Will Grier, another really good college quarterback.
Yeah, he was. I still, man, one of the most entertaining games I ever watched was that 2018 West Virginia Oklahoma game between him and Kyler Murray. That was a phenomenal game.
Will could play, man. Will was a very good college player.
That receiving core he had was very underrated. With David Stills and Gary Jennings, that was a very underrated receiving core. That was a fun game to watch, man.
Isaiah Murphy, do you think next year's defense could become the greatest in Notre Dame history? Wow. Very promising young players and a steady veteran presence.
No, I mean, look, if we're going to talk about history, I mean, let me look this up. In 1966, Notre Dame that year, I'm going to look this up real quick because it's an incredible stat. In 1966, Notre Dame gave up 3.8 points per game. 3.8 points per game. If I remember correctly, let me go to the schedule. They never gave up more than 10 points in a game. No, they gave up 14 in the opener to Purdue, who was number 7. They gave up 14 points. Purdue's quarterback, I believe, was Bob Greasy, a Hall of Fame quarterback, Super Bowl champion. And then they gave up 10 points to Michigan State on the road, who was the number 2 team in the country. Like, they only gave up, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shutouts that year, and then 2 other games they only gave up 7 points. There's only 2 games they gave up 10 points or more, and they gave up 10 or 14. You'll never see that in today's era. Even as bad as Michigan's schedule was this year, they didn't get that. I mean, they gave up 9.5. Right. You know, I mean, think about that. It's like the best scoring defense in college football this year gave up 9.5, which was 3 times that. You know, I mean, if you look at I think it was a 1946 football team, you know, you're talking about a team that gave up like similar numbers. They gave up 2.7 points per game that year. Like you're just never going to see that. The most points they gave up in a game, Ryan, 4 times that year, 1946, they gave up 6 points 4 times.
Yeah.
Every other game they gave up 0. You're never going to see
bad.
that again. Now, if you want to talk about like, could this be the best defense of the modern era? Maybe. I mean, that's a lot. Yeah. I don't know that they have the edge talent to be that. Like to be better than 93 and 05. Well, 93 actually wasn't as good as it should have been because of the defensive coordinator, but it was incredibly good and talented. Can it be better than 2012? Can it be better than this past year, than 2018? Sure, it's got a chance to be that, but I need the edge talent I need the edge production. You got to get after the quarterback more effectively. You've got to be more disruptive, but it's got a chance to be that. But I mean, it doesn't need to be that though. It just needs to be one of the best defenses in this season. That's it. Right. Yes. You could be the top 5 defense this next year, and it's not top 5 in the last 15 years of Notre Dame. Doesn't matter. As long as it's top 5 next year and your offense can match it, then you got a chance to win the championship. But it has a chance to be very good.
It's good enough to be winning a championship if you're just as good as you were this year, right? Like, I mean, I'd be very happy if you just had a repeat of what you did this year, next year. Like, I'd be very happy about that. If it's better, then awesome. Sounds great. Love it. Perfect.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to a few more here.
Andrew Gilmore, in an effort to revive bowl games, would you support moving bowl games to the beginning of the year? We've talked about this before, week 0 through week 1. Also, what do you think about adding an 8-team consultation playoff?
I don't know what that is. Look, as far as the week 0 thing, I have 0 interest in that. What I think could spark some fun is having sort of like kickoff. Remember they used to have like the kickoff classics and stuff like that? There's all those like preseason bowl games, the classics. Notre Dame played against Virginia in 1989 in the kickoff classic in Meadowlands. I'd love to see stuff like that get brought back. Play it at the Cotton Bowl or the Peach Bowl or something like that. That's fine, but that's just
like special events, rivalry type of stuff.
Yeah, right. But like, I'd love to see the first weekend of the season be like, there's like 6 or 7 different kickoff classic type of games that pitch really good team. That's fine. That'd be cool, but not bowl games. You want to you want to make the bowl games matter, then change the rules to, force certain things, to change the rules of the portal window. There's all types of things that you can do. Because those aren't bowl games anymore. They're basically week 0 games. It's no different than Notre Dame playing in Ireland. It's just just a pretty cool, not, neutral site game. It's not a bowl. The other way you can make bowls matter again, and it won't happen anytime soon because of the 12-team playoff, that the contract they just signed. I'll say it again. You want to make bowls matter again? Go back to the old tie-ins or a new type of tie-in with conferences, and don't pick your Final Four until after the bowl games. And now you've got a lot more teams that have a say, and maybe, now number 7 could conceivably jump up into number 4, and their guys are going to play. Georgia and Florida State kids aren't sitting out the Orange Bowl right now, Ryan, if they're not picking the Final Four until after the bowl games, right? Sure. Oregon guys aren't sitting out. Those things aren't happening if they still have a chance to go play for a championship. That's just a fact.
Sure.
And so that's something you could do. And now you're still expanding the amount of teams that can be in because now we're not bitching about should have Florida State have gotten in. Florida State will have their chance to get in because they will play somebody in the top 4 in a bowl game. And they'll have or someone in the top 4 will get beat by somebody else in a bowl game. And you get your chance to make it. Now, again, next year you get the 12-team playoff thing has that, but now now it's more about the playoff and not the bowls. That's about the only way it matters. But that only affects a small number of bowls. You're never going to have bowl season that I can think of that's like it was 20 years ago, unfortunately.
No, there's no going back, I don't think. Yeah, agreed. Will Falk says, I played at the University of Dayton. We were a good non-scholarship FCS program, and you were a Pioneer League team. We had a great culture with guys who love playing together. Do you all have any insight into what the culture is at Notre Dame?
It's still developing. I mean, that's still part of the process of bringing in your guys and getting the coaches here. It's still developing. It's better this year than it was last year, but it's still not where it needs to be. And Will is correct. That culture is incredibly important in building a college football team.
I also love watching Pioneer League teams, man, because they're just playing because they love the game, man. It's
we had a scrimmage against when I was at Witt. We had a scrimmage against Dayton, and I coached against some Pioneer League teams when I was at Duquesne. So it's good football, good coaching there when I was
Davidson and San Diego and those.
I played against Davidson, Ryan. Those were I think the last game I played before I got hurt. My freshman year, we beat them at their place when I was at Methodist. So,
Nice.
yeah, it's a nice win.
ZF with a super chat. Thank you so much. It seems the narrative is Marcus Freeman expected Jared Parker to move on. If so, why hire a wide receiver coach before bringing in a new OC? Was Parker involved with the hire?
We already talked about that last part. No, he was not. That was Marcus Freeman's decision. And if the narrative is true, and I don't believe that to be true, it's just hypothetically it is. What I said, Marcus Freeman was bringing in Mike Brown. Didn't matter what the OC wanted. That's who he was going to hire as the receivers coach.
Mike Brown, no matter what.
Yeah.
Mike Brown, no matter what.
I don't believe Marcus Freeman expected Jared Parker to move on 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. I think within the last week, the expectation was there, but by then you'd already hired Mike Brown. And look, and if it's like one of those things, if you're an OC and you can't work with Mike Brown, then this isn't the place for you.
Sure.
Right? Because this is who I believe in. And Marcus Freeman, just like last year, needs to make sure he's bringing in coaches that he believes in, that have his back, that have a similar philosophy to how they treat people, how to teach and those things. And that's exactly what Mike Brown is. So we got to get rolling here, Ryan. Got two more here real quick. Let's see here. Actually, I think here's one I wanted to get to, and then we have a super chat, and then we'll get out of here.
Okay. Scotty G said, do you think Jared Parker reaches out to any Notre Dame coaches to hire them away? And if so, who do you think he would reach out to?
I don't think so. I mean, look, he didn't really know any of these guys. His only connection to Notre Dame was Marcus Freeman. I mean, he knew Coach Freeman.
I don't know. More likely it's like an analyst or something, like a GA comes to for like promotion type of thing.
The O-line GA that came from Old Dominion, maybe he might look at him as the O-line coach or something like that. One of the analysts was a guy that Jared worked with at West Virginia. He may look like him, but like none of the full. You're correct, right? And maybe guys like that, but none of the full-time coaches
for like promotions type of thing.
Exactly. Because there's no assistant coach that's unless he's going to get fired, that's going to leave Notre Dame to go to Troy. Like Mike Mickens is not going to leave Notre Dame to go be the D coordinator at Troy.
Well, I was going to use Dylan as like an example, right? Like Dylan McCullough is probably going to make more money as a running back coach at Notre Dame than he would as an OC at Troy. I mean, possibly. Like, you know what I mean?
Guys, Mike Denbrock only made $450,000 as the OC at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be willing to bet you that Jared Parker's either making the same amount of money or less money at Troy that he made at Notre Dame. Come here, baby.
I believe.
So, yeah. We got last super chat here, Ryan.
Andy Milton fan, thank you so much, Nathan. Hashtag BK kneels at the feet of the IB throne. Hashtag better.
That's better. Yeah, that's better. You just got to pace yourself, man. Give like one a week because there's only so many of those that are going to be really smart. You know what I mean? So. Yeah,
he's a big hashtag guy, man. He's been on Twitter a little bit too long.
He's got some anger towards Brian Kelly still building up, which I kind of dig. I'm not gonna lie to you. I do want to read this last one, Ryan. This is a good one from Joe Allen. He says, "Joining the boards on Thursday is my wife's birthday gift to me. She said I couldn't do it before my birthday, though. All good, man. Better late than never, my friend. We appreciate you very, very much, Joe. So, yeah, appreciate you, man. Absolutely. And that's gonna do it, Ryan. Why don't you go ahead and take us out of here, man?"
All right, folks. Well, we really appreciate you guys for stopping in today to talk a little bit of Notre Dame practice report, offensive coordinator position discussion. Excuse me. Talked about a couple candidates if you weren't earlier in the show, and of course, hit the mailbag at the end. Make sure before you leave, hit that like button for us. Subscribe to the podcast. That notification bell at the bottom of the screen, if you're listening to us on YouTube, will notify you on any show that's coming up, which includes IB Nation Sports Talk tonight at 6:00 Eastern Time, which includes tomorrow. 12 o'clock National Signing Day show. Make sure that you're subscribed and you lock into that. I think we're up to like 15 or 16 guests now on tomorrow's show. So there's going to be a lot of great parents, recruits, some coaches even that are going to be on tomorrow. So make sure that you stay locked in there. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, 5-star reviews are always very much appreciated. If you're not on the message board, like Joe Allen is now signed up, boards.irishbreakdown.com. And we'll check you guys very soon again here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.